Chapter 286. About half a year has passed since the fight with Saito. In the past half a year, Ryudo had earned a lot of money from the Black Hand Alliance and the Rulong Security Company. Later on, Mrs. Rue Hui had returned 2 billion to him. He was really rich. According to Long Do's incomplete statistics, the total amount of money he had earned in the past 6 months was at least 5 billion yuan. Later on, because of the large amount of money that came into his account, he could no longer keep track of it. More than 5 billion. What kind of concept was that? That was a level where one could really casually buy things in the shop and add points to one's personal attribute points. At this time, on the interface that Dunia could not see, Ryudo's attributes had changed. Name: Ryudo Kiryoage, 16 attributes: Wisdom LV4, Physique LV4, Courage LV4, Insight LV4, Charm LV4. Chi opening rate: 81%. Title: Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 5 billion. The number of title slots will increase by 2. Stupid Rich, obtained after spending more than 500 million. The number of equipment slots will increase by 2. God of Guns, obtained after shooting more than 50,000 bullets. Man and Gun is 1. Invincible, equipment: Bauer Heavy Assault Rifle, legendary, Nano Spider. Grappling Rope, legendary, dual-wielding Glock 19C, elite. RPG-32 Rocket Launcher, elite. Super Large Grenade Box, elite. Equipment: None Tools. Hooligan Velcro, Hooligan Analysis Mirror, Hooligan Voice-Changing Mask, Hooligan Glider, Hooligan Gel Body Armor, Hooligan X-Ray Lens, Hooligan Sonic Wave Instrument Skills. Chinkuan Foundation Technique, 80%. Princess Mystery Technique, 80%. Ancient Bajikwan, 100%. Furamaki Style Martial Arts, 80%. Bone Twisting Hand, 100%. Iron Bone Mastery, 100%. Copper Skin Mastery, 100%. Parkour Master, 100%. Hooligan Immortality, 100%. Silent Movement, 100%. Aura Shield, 100%. Omnipotent Driver, 100%. Firearms Mastery, 100%. Total Assets: 854 million renminbi. How should he describe these attributes? Just one look was enough to scare a person to death. There was no need to mention his 5 measurements. Other than Charm, which he didn't spend money to upgrade to LV5, he spent 500 million on each of the other 4 attributes to upgrade them to the highest or second highest level. With LV5 Physique and LV5 Courage added together, he was basically at the level of a monster who could walk unhindered through a mountain of blades and a sea of flames. Even if the Heavenly Emperor came, he would still be able to beat the crap out of you. With LV4 Resourcefulness and LV4 Insight added together, it was enough to carry out very profound thinking and even see through the mental activities of others. After that, his chi opening rate also rose to a near-perfect level by repeatedly committing suicide to buy the Qian Kuan Foundation building technique and the Immerse mystic art. However, because the last purchase of these 2 techniques was too expensive, 320 million each, he didn't buy them to the maximum for the time being. Other than these 2 books, there was also the Furamaki-style martial arts that didn't reach the maximum. Because the price of the blank skill book was also a bit expensive, he could only buy the 80% proficiency that was completely enough. Of course, other than that, most of the useful skills had already been bought to the maximum proficiency. Combined with Ryudo's LV5 Physique and 81% Chi opening rate, his unarmed combat strength had already reached a level that was close to invincible. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that if the current him went back to half a year ago to fight with someone who had entered the Dao, he wouldn't even need to use the hooligan does not die by bare hands to trick others. He could more or less kill them within 10 moves. The current Ryudo was this strong, at the level of a ceiling. However, compared to unarmed combat, the unlocking of the 2 titles Stupid Guy Has a Lot of Money and Gun God was also a big key to increasing his combat strength. The former required more than $5 billion to obtain, but it was very useful. It could actually increase the number of titles in the title bar by 2 slots, which meant that he could equip 3 titles at the same time. The latter, on the other hand, was obtained by firing 50,000 bullets. It could upgrade the gun, a weapon that Ryudo didn't use very often, to the extreme, allowing him to wield it like an extension of his arm in the state of one with the gun. The Gun God title, Combined with the gun master at full proficiency and super high insight, Ryudo could even accurately shoot a fly from 100 meters away. Moreover, the speed at which he drew his gun was also the fastest in the world. He really could be called the gun god of this generation. Other than that, Ryudo's item bar also added a few useful special items. The Hooligan's Gel Bulletproof Vest, needless to say, it had the same effect as Dunia's, which could greatly increase one's defense. After wearing it, Ryudo's full proficiency of Bronze Skin Mastery, Iron Bone Mastery, and LV5 Physique, he could almost ignore the power of a rocket launcher. A full automatic rifle strafing was no different from scratching an itch. The remaining Hooligan's X-ray lens and Hooligan's sonograph were also very useful items. The former could see through a certain range, such as what was in someone's cabinet, while the latter could detect the number of creatures in the surroundings through sound waves. In other words, any tricks in front of Ryudo were almost meaningless. He was like a robot with a radar on, knowing how many enemies were nearby, and also knowing what the hands under the table were doing. As for the Bauer Heavy Assault Rifle, Spider Grappling Rope, Dual-Wielding Glock 19C, and Super Large Grenade Box, they were all the best equipment that Kaiyang had found. These powerful weapons, together with the RPG-32 individual rocket launcher from before, formed Ryudo's current super powerful firepower system. Coupled with the God of Guns title, he could dominate the battlefield, even more so than Rambo. Because of this, when Long Do found out that the Mafia in Moscow dared to pick a fight with the Black Hand Alliance, his first reaction was to teach them a lesson and let them know who had the final say in this world. Just like that, when the two of them were completely prepared, they were lovey-dovey in the room for a while. Only then did they hear a knock on the door. Ryudo opened the door and found that the Big Dipper Alliance member, Ixin, was already waiting with a few subordinates. He bowed to the two of them and said, "Boss Tong Sheng, are you ready to go now?" "Sure. Speaking of which, where is the Tomahawk base?" "It's at 707 Old Village Street in the outskirts of Moscow. It's about half an hour's drive from here." "Okay, let's go." After hearing the address, Ryudo took out his phone from his pocket, entered the address, and sent it to someone. "That? Boss Tong Sheng? Is sister-in-law coming with us?" Before leaving, Ixin looked at Dunia, who was in light clothes, and couldn't help but show a surprised expression. Yesterday, when Ryudo came to Moscow with a little beauty like Dunia, Ixin could only understand that the boss needed someone to serve him, so he didn't think it was strange. But now they were going to negotiate with the boss of Tomahawk, which could lead to a fight at any time. Wasn't it suicide to bring such a girl there? Ryudo smiled and said, "It's okay. Don't worry, she's my most trusted bodyguard." "Most trusted? It can't be, right? Is Boss Tong Sheng joking?" After taking another look at Dunia, who had delicate skin and delicate facial features like a doll, Ixin felt that it was inappropriate, but he couldn't say anything. He could only order his men to drive to the old village street. While driving, Ixin repeatedly emphasized, "Boss Tong Sheng, the Tomahawk base we're going to is their nest. According to our previous investigation, there are 3 bases nearby, and there are at least 500 Mafia members gathered in the bases. Almost all of them are armed with live ammunition, and there are also a lot of heavy firepower weapons." "Oh, so? It's best not to have a conflict with Yakov, or else it's really difficult to protect the two of you with our manpower." Speaking until here, Ixin couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. After all, when he knew that Ryudo was going to negotiate with Yakov, he was almost scared to death by the young leader of the Black Hand Alliance. In Ixin's view, this was a stupid move to put his life in the hands of others. If Yakov only wanted to extort some money, it was fine. But if the two sides really couldn't come to an agreement and fought, and Ryudo died here, then Ixin didn't know how to face the boss of Mizar. But unlike Ixin's worried expression, Ryudo just smiled and didn't say anything, because this small problem didn't exist in his view. In the end, Ryudo didn't want to deal with a mere tomahawk, but the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group that might fish in troubled waters. Compared to that huge organization, Tomahawk was simply a group of small fries baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. They didn't pose any threat to Ryudo. Just like this, in Ixin's fearful thoughts, the car slowly drove to the outskirts of Moscow, and stopped in front of a very peaceful-looking villa. This was a 3-story villa built in the forest. The villa was surrounded by thick walls that even trucks would have a hard time breaking through. It looked like a military building. Even from afar, one could see that inside and outside the villa, there were all kinds of assault rifles, shotguns, hunting rifles, and other weapons in their hands patrolling. It was a completely austere atmosphere. And before Ryudo and Dunya entered through the main door, he ordered Isshin, "You guys wait outside. If there are gunshots inside, don't come in, immediately retreat, understand?" This boss Tong Sheng? You guys plan to go in with just 2 people? At this time, Isshin's face became even paler, but he still tried to persuade. "Wait, boss Tong Sheng, do you speak Russian? At least bring me along as a translator, right? Otherwise, how can you?" "It's okay, Russian or something, I can translate it." But before he finished speaking, Dunya, a native of the Northern Kingdom, said with a smile in Russian that was much more fluent than his. Chapter 287. Although Dunya didn't speak Russian much, she was still a Russian. Naturally, she wouldn't forget how to speak her mother tongue. Acting as a translator was not a problem for her. This shouldn't be a problem, right? Seeing Ryudo and Dunya walk into the villa under the escort of several brawny men, Isshin, who was waiting outside with his men, couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Speaking of which, the new leader of Tomahawk, Yakov, had a very bad reputation in Moscow's underworld. Moscow's underworld was originally made up of a group of villains. If even this group of villains thought Yakov was a villain, then this guy obviously had a problem. Perhaps because it was already noon, when Ryudo and Dunya arrived at the villa's 3rd-floor hall, they saw the new leader, Yakov, who was sitting alone at a large dining table, wolfing down food. Yakov looked like a typical European. His nose was narrow and raised, his lips were thin, and his facial features were defined. His beard and hair were as lush as a lion's. Right now, this Tomahawk leader was wearing a green combat uniform and heavy leather boots. He was holding a sharp military knife in his hand and cutting the raw meat on the table. That's right, raw meat. Although there was no way to distinguish what kind of meat it was indeed a large piece of raw meat on the table. And this man didn't hesitate to cut off pieces of meat, stuffed the meat mixed with blood into his mouth, and chewed hard. Although Europe also had the habit of eating undercooked meat, but there weren't many people like Yakov who directly used a military knife to cut and eat a large piece of raw meat. This gave people a feeling of drinking blood. He didn't look like a normal person. And in this spacious hall, other than Yakov himself, there were at least 7 to 8 brawny men sitting and standing on the sofa, chairs, and by the stove. These guys were either wiping the sharp blades in their hands, maintaining various types of firearms, or lifting huge dumbbells for exercise. After seeing Ryudo and Dunya come in, these brawny men looked at them with malicious eyes, except for the cloaked man standing behind Yakov. Although it was indoors, the man was still wearing a heavy cloak. Furthermore, he was wearing an eye patch like a pirate's on his left eye. Coupled with his sinister and cold gaze, one could tell that this guy was not a simple character with a single glance. But after seeing Yakov's table manners, Ryudo maintained a polite smile and said to Dunya without turning his head, "Yo, this guy is trying to intimidate us, but he looks funny." Humph. Dunya, after hearing this, she walked 2 steps forward and said to the man sitting behind the table in Russian, "Yakov, this is the leader of the Black Hand Alliance, Ryudo Kiryo. You should know he's coming, right?" After hearing Dunya's words, Yakov slowly put down the military knife in his hand and revealed a wild and bloody wolf-like smile. "Indeed," he sneered. "But I didn't expect the legendary leader of the Black Hand Alliance to be a brat. What a disappointment." Dunya also replied tit for tat. "I also didn't expect the new leader of Tomahawk to be such a rude bastard. Have you thrown away the etiquette of northern hospitality into the trash can?" Whoosh. When Dunya mercilessly mocked Yakov, the surrounding members of Tomahawk immediately stood up and looked at the girl with murderous eyes. But Yakov himself didn't have any reaction. He even laughed. "Ha ha ha. As expected of Saito Takahiro's daughter, you have the same spirit as your father, although his Russian isn't as good as yours. Oh? Hearing her father's name, Dunia raised her eyebrows and said, "You've seen my father? That was more than a decade ago. At that time, I had some conflicts with your father, so I wanted to kill him. In the end, he defeated my strongest fighter." Suddenly, Yakov smiled and said to the cloaked man behind him, "Let this little princess see what her father did back then." The cloaked man nodded and walked to the table. He opened his cloak in front of Dunia and Ryuto. The cloak slid off, exposing a crippled right hand that was embedded with a sharp blade at the elbow. The right hand had been cut off from the elbow, and a knife had been inserted into the top of the head. It looked very eerie and terrifying. Obviously, this was a memorial left by Saito Takahiro, the strongest fighter of Tomahawk, when he was in Moscow more than a decade ago. "Your father is really powerful." Seeing that Dunia was completely indifferent, Yakov continued with a smile. "At that time, I ordered him to take your father's life. As a result, his right hand was broken by a punch, and his left eye was shattered by a palm strike. He went from a normal person to a half-cripple." Humph! But after hearing Yakov's words, Dunia sneered and said, "That's a pity. After all, my father is too benevolent. If it were me, I wouldn't be able to deal with it so easily." "Oh? What would happen if it were you? I'm curious." Hearing this, Yakov's eyes sharpened and nodded to the cloaked man. Next, the cloaked man moved. The cloak in his left hand flew to Dunia, blocking the girl's view, and at the same time, his figure rushed forward like lightning. The sharp blade in his right hand was aimed at the left carotid artery of the girl's neck. When an expert makes a move, it's easy to tell. Although the cloaked man was almost crippled by Takahiro more than a decade ago, after a certain body transformation, his strength was better than before. Especially the sword in place of his arm. It was even more powerful. Such a sinister move to flick the cloak and stab the neck, coupled with the special design of the knife with 2 blood grooves. If one were to be scraped near the carotid artery, there would only be one outcome. A large amount of blood would gush out, and one would instantly become a bloody person and die. But at the moment when the cloaked man moved, Ryuto, who was not far away, did not move, and even had a relaxed expression on his face, as if he didn't care whether Dunia would be hurt or not. Indeed, in fact, he didn't need to care. Because in the next second when the sharp blade quickly pierced the cloak, a slender fist wearing a glove had landed on the man's face. Too fast, Dunia's speed was simply too fast. Although the man's speed was extremely fast, but compared to Dunia's super speed, it paled in comparison. Before the cloak could cover the girl, she had already leapt up, and in midair, a fist punched the cloaked man's left cheek. Generally speaking, what would happen after being hit by someone's fist? Swelling? Bleeding? Fracture? Fainting? None of those. After being struck by Dunia's fist, the result would be 10 times more horrifying than what one would expect. Because under Yakov's suddenly horrified gaze, the cloaked man's neck flew out like a baseball and coincidentally landed on the dining table in front of him. What? What is this? Originally, the dining table was already badly mutilated due to some unknown animal's meat. Now, a complete face with an excited expression suddenly landed on top of it, and the face was facing Yakov. This scene was extremely bizarre. With a punch, the man's head was sent flying, but his face was not injured. Very obviously, Dunia's punch not only contained extreme strength, but also contained an extremely exquisite technique. If not, the cloaked man's head wouldn't have been sent flying, but rather his head would have exploded like a watermelon. But this was obviously the result Dunia wanted. When the cloaked man's head landed in front of Yakov, the expression on the face of the new head of Tomahawk couldn't be more marvelous. At the same time, the surrounding 7 murderous-looking men who seemed ready to attack at any time were stunned in place. Obviously, Dunia's terrifying punch had made their scalps numb. "I told you." After casually making such a terrifying move, Dunia sneered. "My father's weakness is that he is too benevolent. Otherwise, he wouldn't have let such trash live until today. But it doesn't matter. The work that my father didn't finish, as his daughter, I will finish it." Looking at the bloody head on the dining table, Dunia's eyes flashed with a trace of disdain. Yakov finally realized what had happened. He finally stood up with a furious face and slammed the table. He loudly shouted to the surrounding men, "Attack! Kill them!" In order to deal with the visit of the Black Hand Alliance leader, Yakov had already made ample preparations. Almost a second after he gave the order, 7 long and short, fully automatic, and semi-automatic firearms were all aimed at Ryudo and Dunia. They didn't hesitate to pull the trigger. For this group of mafia members who usually used guns to make a living, drawing a gun, aiming, and designing this series of actions were already familiar to them. The speed was so fast that it could be completed in about a second. But for Ryuto, who was present, this 1 second was really too long. Bang, 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 bang. 7 waves of sharp gunshots flashed almost at the same time, and an incredible scene appeared. What would happen? Under Yakov's stunned gaze, the 7 men who were ready to shoot all clenched their fingers in pain and fell to the ground. Upon closer inspection, the index fingers that they used to pull the trigger were all broken in an instant. The cause of all this was a pair of Glock 19C dual pistols that Long Do held in his hands at some point in time. Chapter 288. There was still some smoke coming out of the thin handgun's muzzle. Obviously, it was from here that the 7 bullets that were like divine punishment had been shot out. The Glock 19C in Ryudo's hand was a pocket-sized automatic pistol. It was extremely small and easy to carry and dual-wield. It also had a magazine capacity of 15 bullets. It was a small firearm very suitable for this god of guns. Although the firing speed of this automatic pistol was completely dependent on the speed of pulling the trigger, it was the first time Yakov saw 7 consecutive shots that were so fast and so accurate. The moment the 7 gunmen pulled out their guns and pulled the triggers, Long Do raised his hands several times faster. The 2 Glock 19Cs spat out sparks like lightning and accurately hit the fingers of the 7 gunmen that were pulling the triggers. What is this? Is this the descent of God? When Yakov saw this scene, he was completely dumbfounded. He couldn't imagine that there would be such a fast and accurate gun in the world. Hey, is that it? Show me what else you have. Just when Yakov was about to be scared out of his wits, Dunia slowly came to the front of the table and said to the new head of Tomahawk in a condescending tone over the head that was sent flying by her punch, "Monster. These 2 guys are both monsters." Yakov had been mocking the leader of the Black Hand Alliance, Ryudo Kiryu, as an idiot who dared to bring a little girl to the Tomahawk headquarters alone. It wasn't until they showed their prowess that Yakov realized that these 2 monsters weren't idiots, but they didn't even put Tomahawk in their eyes. The female monster who could send heads flying with 1 punch, Saitu Dunia. The male monster who could defeat 7 gunmen in an instant, Ryudo Kiryu. At this moment, Yakov looked at them with deep fear in his eyes because he didn't know what kind of creature he was fighting. But even so, the new head of Tomahawk still forced himself to say, "Don't think that you've won just like that. There are still 3 bases around this villa. Hundreds of my subordinates are stationed there. They even have heavy firepower in their hands. If you kill me, you won't be able to escape either." The so-called heavy firepower weapons included but were not limited to rocket launchers, mortars, various missiles, and so on. According to Yakov, as long as Long Do and Dunia killed him, the subordinates over there would immediately launch missiles and destroy the entire villa. At that time, no matter how powerful you 2 are, you won't be able to avoid the bombardment of the rocket launchers and mortars, so it's better for us to sit down and talk. Seeing that the hard way didn't work, Yakov changed his strategy. He put on a "you're just here to talk business, there's no need for violence" attitude, completely ignoring the fact that he was the one who made the first move. After listening to Dunia's translation, Ryudo's face showed a joyful expression. He took out his phone from his pocket and looked at the message he just sent. Then he said to Dunia, "Let this guy call the people in the 3 bases around here. Call everyone here?" This, although Dunia didn't quite understand Ryudo's meaning, she still faithfully translated his words to Yakov. "You don't believe me, right?" Suddenly, Yakov picked up the phone under the table and laughed. "In a moment, you'll be pointed at by a lot of heavy weapons, so it's better not to be so arrogant." After saying this, he dialed the number of the first base. Beep beep, Beep beep, beep beep. But strangely, Yakov waited for more than 10 seconds. But no one at the base picked up the phone to answer. What's going on? Don't tell me they're sleeping in? After frowning, Yakov continued to call the second base. Beep beep, beep beep, beep beep. But very strangely, no one picked up the phone at the second base. At this time, Yakov finally felt a little panicked. He hurriedly dialed the number of the last base, but it was obviously the same result. What's going on? Why are the people in the surrounding bases? Don't tell me. Hey, look at this. Just when Yakov thought of the worst result, Ryudo also took his phone and put it in front of him. Yakov looked up and saw a very familiar scene on the phone. If he wasn't scared out of his wits, it should be the scene inside one of the bases nearby. Although it was the scene inside the base, the situation was completely different from usual. In the huge base, there was smoke and blood everywhere. The members of Tomahawk were like garbage being thrown into a truck by a group of fully armed professional special forces wearing camouflage vests with the pattern of golden dragon swirling sky and multifunctional tactical helmets. They were ready to be buried somewhere. When Yakov saw this scene, he only felt his knees soften, and he knelt on the ground unconsciously. It's over. Everything is over. Obviously, the subordinates in the three bases not far away have been wiped out, and his last bargaining chip as the new leader of Tomahawk has completely disappeared. This time, he was really meat on the chopping block. At this time, Dunia, who saw the pictures in the phone, couldn't help but ask, "Oh, where did those soldiers come from? They're so fast." This is the most elite Dragon Fang tactical team of our Rulong Security Company. Every one of them is an elite. It's easy to suppress the mafia. In fact, as early as yesterday, Ryudo had already ordered Gao Yuan to transfer the Dragon Fang tactical team to Moscow. Not long ago, he also sent the address of the Tomahawk headquarters to the team captain there and ordered them to suppress all the enemies in the three bases nearby. With the strength of the elite mercenaries who had been fighting on the battlefield in the Middle East not long ago, it was easy for them to do this, especially when the enemy was caught off guard. This made the battle quickly become a one-sided massacre. After turning off the phone, Ryudo grabbed Yakov's hair and pulled him up from the ground. He said to him with a smile, "Now you should know what the situation is, right? Who is in charge here?" When he heard Dunia's translation, Yakov replied with a pale face. The previous transaction plan of tripling the price is cancelled. In the future, Tomahawk guarantees to supply you firearms at the original price. Is that okay? Bang. The next second after Dunia translated his words to Ryuto, the pistol in Ryuto's hand spewed out a burst of fire, killing a member of Tomahawk, who fell to the ground and covered his finger not far away. Seeing this guy pull out a gun and kill without saying anything, Yakov quickly continued, No. I mean, in order to show my sincerity, we will supply you at 70% of the previous price. Bang! Before he finished, Ryudo fired 2 more shots and directly blew up the heads of 2 Tomahawk members who were about to escape. 130%. That's almost our cost price. Let's make friends. I don't want to earn a penny from you. Bang, bang. Another 4 shots were fired at the same time as lightning. The last 4 Tomahawk members who were still alive in the hall were all killed. When Ryudo finally pressed the muzzle on Yakov's head, the man almost collapsed in fear. No money. As long as you let me go, I will do anything. I will supply you with weapons for free in the future. In a situation where there was no other way, Yakov could only make the most humble promise while trembling with fear. However, this was not what Ryudo wanted. He pointed the gun at Yakov's head and asked, "Recently, someone in the Moscow underground world purchased nuclear materials from your group of mafias. Does that have anything to do with your sudden increase in price?" After listening to Dunia's translation, Yakov's face suddenly changed. Obviously, Ryudo was right. So Yakov quickly replied, "Yes, there is such a thing. Our Tomahawk happened to have a batch of nuclear materials in storage and couldn't sell them. That person said that we could buy them all at once, but the condition was that we were not allowed to sell weapons to your Black Hand Alliance. So we raised the price to a level that you couldn't accept. We were forced. As expected, it was Nicholas who did it. After understanding the whole story, Ryudo couldn't help but sneer. The old grudges between Ryudo and the Heavenly Eye Group were long known to both sides. Presumably, the Heavenly Eye Group recently noticed the rapid expansion of the Black Hand Alliance, so they wanted to do something to them. Coincidentally, the group needed to make a big deal with the Moscow mafias to purchase all the nuclear materials in their hands. Therefore, Nicholas thought of cutting off the Black Hand Alliance's purchase of weapons in Moscow to limit the development of this emerging force. This kind of roundabout approach was very similar to the style of the weapons department head, because in Red Album 2, No Survivors, the guy who used to be a bare KGB agent was indeed very sinister and often used some underhanded methods, such as ambushing all kinds of special bombs that he developed and so on. Thinking of this, Ryudo continued to ask, "Who was the person who contacted you before? Is it Nicholas? Where are they?" "It's Nicholas, he." Beep. Just as Yakov was about to say some information about the minister of the Heavenly Eye Group, all of a sudden, the sound of some mechanism being activated came from the floor under his seat. Boom. In the next moment, the bomb that had been hidden under the floor exploded with a loud bang. The moment the bomb exploded, the strong blast and impact centered on the seat Yakov was used to sitting as the center, and almost the entire hall was swept in. Chapter 289. The bomb buried in the ground suddenly exploded. Yakov, who was sitting directly above the bomb, almost didn't have time to react before he was blown into a bloody mess. The huge and exquisite dining table flew to the ceiling and then slammed into it. When the dining table worth hundreds of thousands of rubles fell to the ground with a lot of dust and ceiling debris, even the designer couldn't recognize it. At the same time, when the explosion slowly dissipated, the originally magnificent villa's third-floor hall also showed a messy scene. The shattered floor, ceiling, chairs, and ornaments mixed with human wreckage scattered around. The scene was simply like hell. And in the center of hell, Ryudo protected Dunya in his arms, using his back to withstand the power of the explosion at close range. Generally speaking, Ryudo withstood the impact of the explosion at a distance of at most 1 meter from the explosion site. The result was most likely to be blown apart. But in fact, this was not the case. At the moment of the explosion, he quickly turned around and lowered his head to hug Dunya, using his back to withstand the explosion, but the result was only his clothes were blown apart. The rogue gel bulletproof vest inside was still intact, and he was completely fine. It was simply the strength of a rogue's body. After coming out from Ryudo's arms, Dunya looked at the position where Yakov was originally, and asked in confusion, What happened? Why did it suddenly explode?" "It was a listening bomb. We were tricked, that bastard Nikolai." Suddenly, Ryudo stood up and patted the dust on his body, and said with a dignified face. Obviously, even if Yakov had cerebral palsy, it was impossible for him to bury a bomb under his butt, so the bomb was definitely not buried by him. And very coincidentally, the bomb buried under the floor happened to explode when Yakov was about to say the information about the buyer. There was only one reason for this situation, and that was that this hall was monitored by someone. And when they heard that the guy was about to reveal some important information, they activated the bomb and killed him. Perhaps they wanted to kill Ryudo as well. There weren't many people who could plant a bomb in Tomahawk's nest right in front of him. Coincidentally, there was one in Moscow, and that was the head of the weapons department of the Heavenly Eye Group, Nikolai. According to Ryudo's knowledge, Nikolai was a true master of arms. As a member of the KGB, he was highly proficient in all kinds of light and heavy firepower weapons. He was especially fond of all kinds of bombs, so he was jokingly called the explosive genius by the players in the game. Nicholas had been to Tomahawk's base before, and he had enough strength and reason to bury the bomb, so there was no need to suspect anyone else. But now, Ryudo had planned to find some information about Nikolai from Yakov's mouth and infer where the nuclear materials had gone. It would be best if he could stop them from leaving Moscow. But now that the bomb went off, the new head of Tomahawk was turned into a pile of debris. There was no way he could get anything out of him. Sigh. I can only ask the other mafias? So troublesome. Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but sigh. Then he planned to go outside and follow Ishian to find the other mafias in Moscow that sold nuclear materials. But at this moment, Dunia cautiously said, "Do you want to change your clothes before going out?" "Change my clothes? It's a bit dirty, but it doesn't matter." "It's not a matter of whether it's dirty or not. It's... But... After hearing Dunia's words, Long Do turned his head to look at his perky and powerful buttocks, only to discover that his pitch-black buttocks were wantonly blooming in the cold wind. With Ryudo's strength, he could indeed do it without looking back at the explosion. But the problem was that he could do it, but his clothes couldn't. Therefore, after blocking the explosion with his back, the clothes on his back, from the collar to his thighs, were all gone. The tight-fitting Rogue's Gel bulletproof vest had also turned black, but one could still vaguely see his swaying buttocks. "Nikolai, I'm not done with you." After quickly running to the second floor and changing into a set of clothes, Ryuto looked at Dunia, who was staring at his buttocks with a smile, and his resentment toward the Minister of Arms became even stronger. But no matter how much resentment he still had to do what he had to do. Soon after, Ryuto, led by Ishian, who was so shocked that his eyes almost popped out of his head, went to find the other mafias in Moscow one by one. Unfortunately, it was too late. When Ryuto found them and used some similar methods to have a friendly negotiation with them to make them willing to tell the truth, he found out that Nikolai had already left with his men. In addition, in the other mafia bases, they also found listening bombs similar to the one in Tomahawk's base. When the mafias found out that a bomb was installed in their base, they were furious, but they couldn't do anything to the bastard Nikolai. They could only sign a new contract with Ryudo, promising to continue to supply large amounts of firearms to the Black Hand Alliance at a very low price. This new contract, in addition to the large amount of light and heavy firepower weapons that the Dragonfang team dug out from the Tomahawk warehouse, was more than enough for Ryudo to arm the Rulong Security Company to the teeth. It could be said that this trip to Moscow was a profitable one. However, although he made a lot of money, when he left Moscow on the third morning, Ryudo's expression was still very unhappy. After all, the most important nuclear materials were transported back to Yodo by Nikolai. The Tenmu Group was still building the ultimate nuclear weapon, Sixth Demon's Fury, that could sink Sakura according to the plan. Ryudo didn't accomplish anything. "Ryudo, get ready to go online." Okay." Seeing Ryudo's sullen and absent-minded look, Dunia came over and hugged his arm considerately. She smiled and said in his ear, "Don't be unhappy. How about I stay with you for a few days and accompany you?" "Accompany me? Oh, this is a good idea." After hearing Dunia's meaningful words, Ryudo's mood suddenly became better. After all, the thought of being able to bring this Lolita wife home and having a good time with her at night naturally made him feel happy, spirited, and passionate. Because he had been sleeping in the Moscow Four Seasons Hotel for the past few days, although he slept soundly with the loli every day, Ryudo still missed his own bed a little, and he also wanted to try the feeling of having sex in his own bed. "By the way, my bedroom hasn't been blessed yet." Let Dunia try the bed first to see if she is used to it. Otherwise, Colored Glaze and Yunyin won't be used to it in the future. Thinking of this, Ryudo couldn't help but reach out and hug the slender waist of the lowly wife next to him. He looked like he might be arrested at any time. However, just as Ryudo proudly hugged Dunia and prepared to get on the plane first and fly back to Tokyo, a little girl ran over and handed a letter to Ryudo. Looking at the letter handed over by the little girl, Dunia asked in confusion, "Brat? What is this?" "I don't know. An uncle over there asked me to help deliver it." The little girl shook her head. Then she put the letter in Ryudo's hand and ran away. "An uncle?" Dunia quickly looked around when she heard the words, but the airport waiting area was full of people. It was a bit difficult to find a specific uncle. "No need to look. I know who it is. It's the guy Nicola who sent the letter." Although the envelope hadn't been opened yet, Ryudo had already seen the contents of the letter with his rogue's perspective, as well as the big Heavenly Eye Group logo. Thus, Long Do casually opened the envelope. The content of the letter was just a simple line of words. "Thank you for your hard work. See you in Tokyo." It's really a letter in Nicola's style. After looking at the handwritten letter from the head of the Heavenly Eye Group Weapons Department, Nicola, Ryudo couldn't help but show a forthright smile. Indeed, although the dragon battle had profited this time, the Heavenly Eye Group had clearly profited even more. They had successfully obtained the nuclear materials they wanted, and could go back to show off their skills and create their ultimate killing weapon. But even so, Ryudo didn't lose. He still had a lot of opportunities to stop these guys from making trouble. After all, according to his foresight, it would take at least a year for the sixth Sky Demon's Fury to be made. In other words, there was still a year left before the decisive battle with Iam. During this period of time, Ryudo could still continue to develop his strength and strengthen his strength. At least after a year, he had full confidence in taking down the Heavenly Eye Group and that perverted woman. However, just as Ryudo was hugging Dunia and boarding the plane, in the crowd not far away, a burly man wearing a windbreaker and a buzz cut was silently watching the man's figure. Ryudo Kiryu is a man with a lot of tolerance. It seems that he will become a big threat to us in the future. It's better to get rid of him as soon as possible. Watching the plane that Ryudo was on slowly soar into the sky, the windbreaker man, Nicola, took out a red button from his pocket. Without hesitation, he pressed it down. However, after pressing the button, nothing happened. The windbreaker man frowned and pressed the button a few more times, but there was still no reaction at all. The plane in the sky was about to fly out of his sight. In fact, before this, Nicola had already arranged for someone to install a bomb on the plane that Ryudo was going to take. He was ready to kill the guy and the plane together. The reason why he sent the letter was just to make Ryudo careless and think that they would return to Yodo before making a move. Who knew? It was meaningless. The bomb that Nicola arranged in advance couldn't be detonated at all. You actually noticed my plan in advance and defused the bomb. Amazing, it seems that I underestimated you. Seeing Ryudo's plane slowly flying in the direction of Yodo, Nicola couldn't help but sigh and disappear into the noisy crowd. Chapter 290. Ryudo knew that Nicholas would put a bomb on his plane because that guy liked to play this kind of dirty trick. So after he defused the bomb in advance, the plane successfully flew back to Yodo and landed on the runway of Yodo Haneda Airport. Because this trip was quite tiring for Ryudo and Dunia, the two returned to the Rulong Group headquarters and directly fell asleep in Ryudo's room. They didn't do anything messy at night. Just when they got up in the morning of the next day, Dunia, who was wearing a nightgown, patted Ryudo's quilt and shouted to him, "Get up, we have to go to school." Go to school? Ryudo heard the words and got out of the quilt in a daze. He lay on Dunia's smooth thighs and looked at her beautiful face from the bottom and smiled. Why? When did you become a good student? Do you like to go to school so much? In fact, from Ryudo's current situation, it was meaningless for him to go to school. Usually, he just regarded the school as a game place to communicate with the three women. So if Dunia didn't say that she wanted to go to school early in the morning, Ryudo planned to stay with her in the quilt for a while and do something fun to move his body. But for some reason, Dunia seemed to insist on dragging Ryudo to school, so the two got out of the quilt and washed their clothes. After tidying up and eating breakfast, they got in the car and drove to school. Hee. Early in the morning, Dunia seemed to be in a good mood. Even when she was sitting in the car and rushing to school, this lowly wife kept making strange laughter. No one knew what she was laughing about. However, when the two of them arrived at the parking lot outside the school, got out of the car, and walked toward the school gate, Longdo finally realized what the kid was up to. Yohei. Accompanied by a soft chuckle, the young girl reached out and hugged Ryudo's shoulder, walking on the road with the sweet posture of a young girl in love. With such an intimate hug and the sweet smile on Dunia's face, anyone who wasn't blind would be able to tell that the two of them were lovers. Coincidentally, this was the entrance of Dooley First High School, and it was the peak period of school, so the surrounding streets were packed with people. Therefore, this scene caused many people's jaws to drop. Am I seeing things? Is that Ryuto Kiryu and Saito Dunia? Seeing the two of them walking together intimately, with the woman still holding the man's arm, most of the students who were preparing to go to school were stunned. That's right. Early in the morning, the first grade's campus bell, Dongnia, hugged Long Do's arm, and walked towards the school. At a glance, one could tell that they were in a state of passionate love. It was simply enviable. But the problem wasn't here. The problem wasn't the relationship between Ryudo and Dunya. After all, if this group of students remembered correctly, a similar situation should have happened a few months ago. A few months ago, the third-year school beauty, Union Tsukujiri, came to school with Ryudo's shoulder intimately. That time, it even caused a huge commotion in the school. After that, Union also admitted that she was dating Ryuto. While breaking the hearts of many male and female students, everyone could only watch this beautiful senior being eaten by the Demon King Ryudo. At this moment, just a few months later, a similar scene happened again. The man was still the same man, but the woman was no longer the same woman. The one who was hugged by the arm was still Ryudo Kiryu, but the one who was hugging his arm was Dunya Saito. What was this? Was this a joke? So when they saw Ryudo and Dunya walking intimately into the school gate, most of the students who saw this scene were dumbfounded. Logically speaking, Ryudo should be dating Union now. In the past few months, they often saw them going out and going in and out together, so they were quite close. But early in the morning, he came to school with Dunya so intimately. Could this be the legendary cheating? For a moment, the entire Dori First High School was boiling again. The posts on the First High School BBS were like a storm, discussing the relationship between Dunya, Ryudo, and Union. Some people said that Ryudo and Union were a couple, and Dunya was the mistress. Some people said that Ryudo and Dunya were a couple, and that he had already broken up with Union. Some people even said that Ryudo was two-timing, and that he was dating the two jokers at the same time. But no matter what, the three names that kept appearing on the First High School BBS forum and the students' mouths pulled the entire school into an epic love triangle. And at noon on the same day, on the rooftop of a school building, a never-before-seen luncheon slowly began. The host of the luncheon was Year 2 Class A's daughter, Colored Glaze Kenzaki. Currently, a few veins seemed to have appeared on her forehead, and her upright sitting posture seemed to be shaking. It was obvious that this daughter was in a very bad mood. Of course, apart from the host, Colored Glaze, there were two other people participating in this luncheon. They were Year 3 Class A's Union Tsukujiri and Year 1 Class A's Dunya Saito. Just at noon today, Luli invited the two young ladies out for lunch at the same time, which was a rare occurrence. However, she had an ulterior motive. She obviously didn't intend to watch Dunya wolf down the food here. Dunya, who was being stared at by Colored Glaze with a strange gaze, put down the biscuit in her hand and smiled lightly. "Don't keep looking at me like that, Colored Glaze senpai. If you have something to say, just say it." What's going on? This girl seems to have undergone an obvious change. After feeling Dunya's calm temperament, Colored Glaze first frowned, then pretended to ask casually, "By the way, you went to Moscow with Ryudo a few days ago, right? How was the situation there?" "Ah, right, there's such a thing. What did you do in Moscow with Ryudo? I'm very curious." Hearing Colored Glaze's words, Union suddenly remembered this matter, so she opened her eyes wide and looked at Dunya. After Dunya's coming-of-age ceremony, she and Ryudo directly flew to Moscow for a 4-day and 4-night tour. It was impossible to say that Colored Glaze and Union didn't care about this situation. After all, the two of them had never traveled alone with Ryudo before. And outside of the tour, Dunya did not hesitate to do that intimate action in front of the entire school early in the morning, which made people wonder if she had undergone a strange change in mentality during the tour. However, when faced with the two eyes that clearly contained different complicated emotions, Dunya remained calm. Dunya, on the other hand, remained calm and collected. She even leisurely picked up a glass of vodka from the tablecloth. She put the glass to her rosy lips, took a small sip, then smiled. "We just wanted Tomahawk to talk about business. Colored Glaze senpai, didn't you receive the news?" Now that Colored Glaze was the #1 strategist of the Black Hand Alliance, in theory, all the big and small information would go through her eyes. Naturally, she wouldn't miss the things that happened between Ryudo and Dunya in Moscow. "I do have some information, but other than that, I want to know how the two of you spent those few days in the same suite." Seeing that Dunya was still playing dumb in front of her, Colored Glaze finally asked in a displeased tone. Indeed, Colored Glaze knew too much, including the fact that Dunia and Ryudo stayed in the suite of the Four Seasons Hotel in Moscow for 3 days. But after all, there were no surveillance cameras in the suite, so Colored Glaze couldn't figure out what happened between the two of them in the past few days. From Colored Glaze's point of view, Ryudo wouldn't go so far as to lay his hands on Dunia, who had the body of a child. That guy shouldn't be that thirsty. But it was necessary to clarify this matter, especially since Dunia had obviously changed. Otherwise, Colored Glaze and Yunyin would always have a thorn in their hearts. But when faced with this somewhat personal question, Dunia casually replied, "Are you sure you want me to answer? This answer might not be what you want to hear." "Not what I want to hear." "No way, right?" After hearing her words, Colored Glaze and Yunyin looked at each other and saw the disbelief in each other's eyes. "Dunia, don't keep us in suspense, just say it." At this time, Yunyin took the lead and continued to ask, her tone becoming slightly anxious. Originally, Yunyin didn't think too much about Dunia and Ryudo going on a trip, but now that they came back, the feeling that they gave off was getting more and more strange, which made it easy for people's imaginations to run wild. After all, this was Dunia, the usually coarse, rude, and violent silver bear that would explode at the slightest provocation. If it was the previous Dunia, facing Colored Glaze and Yunyin, she definitely wouldn't be so arrogant, as if she was the victor, but now she could. And if one looked closely, it wasn't difficult to notice that the girl's appearance and temperament seemed to be completely different from before. At this time, Yunyin glanced at Dunia's waterfall-like silver-white hair that was tied into a simple ponytail and then draped over her shoulders. This kind of mature and steady hairstyle usually appeared on married wives. Even the more mature Yunyin had a hard time with this kind of unique hairstyle. But now, Dunia was somehow able to pull it off. Mature, married wife, Dunia. These 3 words didn't have any sense of harmony in Colored Glaze's eyes. They were words that couldn't be put together at all. But in reality, even Colored Glaze had to admit that today, Dunia's temperament actually matched this kind of mature hairstyle very well. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world. Chapter 291. Dunia, Saitu Dunia. This stinky bear flat-chested brat actually exuded a graceful, gentle, steady, mature, and elegant feminine aura. It was like seeing a ghost in broad daylight. When she went out, she was a bear brat, and when she came back, she became an elegant wife. The change in temperament wasn't something that could be achieved simply by changing her hairstyle and clothes. It can't be? Dunia? Could it be? She and Ryudo really? What's wrong? Colored Glaze senpai. Your expression is getting weirder and weirder. Just as Colored Glaze was thinking about the impossible answer in her heart, Dunia revealed a devilish smirk and said to Colored Glaze in a proud tone. For some reason, Dunia's body exuded a powerful aura. How should this aura be described? It was like a harem empress, managing the harem on behalf of the emperor. What's going on? Why did she suddenly become so magnanimous? And what's with the arrogance and calmness of a victor? Hee hee. When Colored Glaze couldn't help but take a deep breath and wanted to get to the bottom of it, Dunia smiled. What are you smiling at? I'm smiling at how you have the guts to think nonsense, but don't have the guts to say it. Hearing this, Colored Glaze's body slightly stiffened. She didn't know if it was because Ryudo opened her governor and conception meridian, or if it was because she stepped onto the steps of an adult and became smarter. What was unexpected was that Dunia actually saw through Colored Glaze's thoughts. It felt as if a polar bear suddenly picked up a keyboard and started typing, and it was as ridiculous as Tokyo Villain's love game. For a moment, Colored Glaze was shocked speechless by this ridiculous change, and Yunyin's gaze was also filled with suspicion. Okay, I'll confess. Being stared at by 2 pairs of obviously distrustful eyes, Dunia smiled and waved her hand, showing an "I surrendered" look. Yunyin also slightly sighed in relief and asked with a smile, "Why didn't you just say it earlier? What interesting thing did you encounter when you traveled with Ryudo? Tell me about it." "Ah, it's nothing. It's just that I became an adult with him." "What? When Dunia said those words in a light tone while drinking vodka, the surrounding air, I became an adult with him. Together, that's all. It was a simple line of words, but it contained a lot of incredible information. After all, generally speaking, there were many ways to become adults. However, there was probably only one way for a man and a woman to become adults together. That way was stealing, eating, forbidden fruit. In other words, Dunia's words meant that she and Ryudo already had a relationship, and it was a relationship between a man and a woman. In an instant, Colored Glaze was petrified. Yoon Yin was stunned, and Dunia, on the other hand, puffed up her chest, put her hands on her waist, and put on the posture of a victor. How about it? Do you know what it means to overtake on a curve? No matter how far the two of you ran before, this young lady can directly pass by and leave you far behind. Thinking of this, Dunia's mouth curled up, and her expression was extremely cute. A while ago, she felt the same way when she saw Ryuto being intimate with Yoon Yin and Colored Glaze. Now that the two behind her knew that she overtook them, she felt the same way. Perhaps even more so. She really got her revenge. How? How is that possible? I don't believe it. After a moment, Colored Glaze said in a low voice, with a look of disbelief. How is that possible? Why would Ryudo make a move on Dunia? If he made a move on Yoon Yin, Colored Glaze could still understand. After all, Yoon Yin was full of feminine charm. She was beautiful, had big breasts, a thin waist, a round butt, and long legs. It was normal for Ryudo to not be able to resist the temptation. But what the hell was Dunia? Apart from his face, this stinky brat had nothing else. How could she possibly be the first to take the lead? Something was wrong, right? You don't believe it, right? Dunia heard this and grinned. She took out her phone from her pocket and waved it at Colored Glaze. I have some photos here that can be used as evidence. Do you want to see them? Photos? Could it be those photos? In an instant, Colored Glaze and Yoon Yin looked at the phone in Dunia's hand. Especially the former. Her eyes were about to spit fire. Yoon Yin, on the other hand, was much more open-minded. She quickly leaned over and put her head on Dunia's shoulder. She smiled and said, Aya, is it true? I really want to see it. If Yoon Yin wants to see it, then it's definitely possible. Suddenly, Dunia narrowed her eyes and looked at Colored Glaze. Then, she swiped her phone and showed some of the strange photos she had recently collected. After seeing the photo, Yoon Yin covered her mouth in surprise. Wow, that's amazing. Hee, amazing, right? There's even more amazing. Pfft. Ha ha ha. This photo of Ryudo's expression is a little funny. Indeed, that guy's expression is quite funny sometimes. It's easy to get out of character. Sigh, I'm so envious. Speaking of which, didn't you feel pain at that time? A little at first, but you'll get used to it. Besides, he's quite gentle. On the other side, Yoon Yin and Dunia were laughing and looking at some strange photos, happily exchanging their experiences. On the other side, Colored Glaze was as uncomfortable as if she had eaten a fly. She raised the teacup with trembling hands and tried to pretend that she didn't care about the situation over there. But in fact, I want to see it. I want to see it. I want to see it so much. When the young miss of Kamiyoshi looked at the scene where the two were looking at the photos, her heart was already screaming crazily. How could she not care? After all, she had never done those things with Ryudo before. Not only did Dunia take the lead, she even took photos as a souvenir. It was simply too. It was too enviable. She cared so much. She cared so much about what was in those photos. However, although Colored Glaze really wanted to see the contents of those photos, she couldn't beg Dunia. After all, the two of them had always been on bad terms. Therefore, Colored Glaze, who was originally kneeling on the tablecloth, quietly moved her petite but slightly towards Dunia's direction. After moving a little, seeing that Dunia didn't respond, Colored Glaze began to move again, using her but as a belt, and her waist as a belt to move her legs. Not long after, her body was getting closer and closer to Dunia's position, and the corner of her eyes could gradually see the light on the phone over there. I'm about to see it. Look! But at this moment, Dunia suddenly turned off the phone and smiled. Hey, I've seen enough. Let's continue eating. F***CK. In an instant, colored glaze almost fell to the side. She hurriedly held onto the tablecloth with her hand, supported her slender waist, and looked at Dunia with resentment. Colored glaze, senpai, why are you looking at me like that? Don't tell me you want to see it too? After noticing the resentful gaze, Dunia pretended to widen her eyes in surprise and said to Colored Glaze with a puzzled tone. However, the triumphant look on her face couldn't be concealed. That's right, Dunia was indeed the winner. After all, as an adult, there was a qualitative difference between her and Colored Glaze and Yunyan. This wasn't something that could be made up by the difference in intelligence. Just like that, this rare three-person lunch ended with Dunia's victory. Yoli, on the other hand, angrily ran to Longdo's house after school and vented her anger on this bastard. She didn't leave until very late at night. As for how Colored Glaze kicked up a fuss and how Ryudo comforted her, that was something that couldn't be said in detail. But that afternoon, when Yunyan returned to Tsukuminari Kojo, an unexpected storm slowly blew in her house. When she returned to the living room, the first thing Yunyan saw was her father sitting on the sofa. He didn't look too good, so she asked with a smile, "Dad, why are you back so early today?" Yunyan's father, Tsukujiri Kyoji, was an elegant man with a scholarly aura. He had good facial features, wore square glasses, and always wore a decent white suit. He was the type that would attract attention wherever he went. Usually, Kyoji always had a gentle smile on his face, as if he was a nice guy who would never get angry. But today, Kyoji wasn't like that. "Yunyan, come sit here." After seeing his daughter, the CEO of Tsukuminari Group patted the sofa next to him and said in a tone that made people feel bad, "This feeling? Father seems to want to scold me? Did I do something wrong recently?" Since young, Kyoji rarely scolded Yunyan. After all, Yunyan, the daughter of the Tsukuminari Group, had always been very obedient. There was nothing to scold her about. But today, Kyoji was different. His face was serious, and his eyes were like lightning. His tone also sounded like he expected better from his daughter, as if he was very disappointed in her. So Yunyan deliberately sat opposite Kyoji and asked with a smile, "Dad, what's wrong today? Are you going to scold me? Take a look at this." The next moment, Kyoji took out a few photos from the folder beside him and threw them on the table between the two. "This is... Oh, so that's what it is." Yunyan picked up the photo and looked at it. It was the scene of Ryudo and Dunia intimately holding each other's shoulders as they walked into the school. Now, Yunyan knew why her father was angry. It was because Kyoji already knew that his daughter was dating that extreme leader. But now, his daughter's boyfriend was being intimate with another woman in public. As a father-in-law, it would be strange if he wasn't angry. Chapter 292. But after looking at the photos, Yunyan said with a relaxed smile, "Dad, what are you trying to say by showing me these photos?" "What am I trying to say? Do you still need to ask?" "Break up with Ryudo Kiryu immediately." Seeing his daughter's relaxed expression, Kyoji's eyes became sharper. Actually, when he knew that his daughter was dating the second-generation leader of the Rulon Group, Kyoji's first reaction was to firmly oppose it. After all, Ryudo, that person. Almost all of Tokyo's residents knew that he wasn't a good person. Although the trip to the Kokyo unexpectedly gave him a lot of popularity, the upper class still didn't treat him as a decent person. Such an extreme dojo leader actually got his cute and generous daughter. When Kyoji heard the news, he was so angry that he almost wanted to find Ryudo and scold him, but Shinchin stopped her husband. "Don't worry, isn't Ryudo a good kid? What's wrong with him dating Yunyan?" "Yes, but that guy is extreme dojo. He's not a decent person." "So what if he's extreme dojo?" Mrs. Ruehue also praised him a lot. "Don't tell me you think you're as good at judging people as Ruehue?" After his wife used Ruehue to suppress him, Kyoji was immediately silenced. Kyoji himself was one of the 12 members of the Yatsuki Dark Crow, so he was naturally very familiar with the leader of the Kamiyoshi clan, and he also knew how powerful Ruehue was. If Ryudo was just an ordinary delinquent, then he definitely wouldn't have received Ruehue's approval, so he must have some outstanding strengths. As for what those strengths were, perhaps only Ruehue and Dunia knew. In this case, Kyoji could only acquiesce to his daughter's relationship with Ryuto. However, he also ordered Yunyan to go back to the Yuejian villa every day to prevent his daughter from being taken away by that pig on a dark and windy night if he didn't keep a close eye on her. It had to be said that Gong Si had great foresight. Otherwise, with Yunyan's personality, she wouldn't have waited until now. Ryuto would have eaten her clean. Dunia wouldn't have had the chance to take the lead. But it was clear that although Kyoji could keep an eye on his daughter, he couldn't keep an eye on that bastard Ryuto. Never in his wildest dreams did he expect that bastard to flirt with another woman while he was dating his own daughter. Moreover, the other party was the eldest daughter of the Saito family. This was simply outrageous. Break up, we must break up. Therefore, when Yunyan came back tonight, Kyoji gave his daughter an absolute order to force her to break up with Ryuto no matter what. However, Yunyan lightly shook her head and said without a care, "Dad, you misunderstood. Actually, I know about him and Dunia." What? The moment he heard this, Kyoji was stunned. Did I hear wrong? My daughter said that her boyfriend was flirting with another woman. She knew about it, and she was still so calm when she knew about it? After being stunned for a moment, Kyoji suspiciously asked, "Then that's right. You don't actually like that delinquent, right? That's why you don't care about his cheating." No. I like Ryuto very much." "Then if you like him, how can you tolerate him flirting outside?" "I like Ryuto, but I also like Dunia. What's wrong with that?" This. After hearing Yunyan's overly provocative words, Kyoji couldn't help but widen his eyes as if he couldn't understand what the young people were thinking. Yunyan liked Ryuto, and also liked Dunia. Didn't that mean she was a double-edged sword? Just thinking about his daughter being entangled with a man and a woman, Kyoji almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Damn it. It must be that bastard Ryuto Kiryu who led my obedient daughter astray. I can't let Yunyan continue like this. At this time, Kyoji took a deep breath and said in a deep voice, "We'll move abroad tomorrow. You should also prepare to transfer schools. You can't stay here anymore." Move? Transfer schools? Hearing her father's words, Yunyan finally realized that she was in big trouble. Kyoji seemed to be serious. In Kyoji's view, if his daughter continued like this, she would definitely become a hopeless woman, so he had to get her away from this terrible environment. Therefore, Kyoji decided to move immediately. He planned to take the whole family to a place where Ryuto Kiryu wouldn't be able to find them. Even if it was an uninhabited island, it would be better than staying in Tokyo. As for this sudden decision, Yunyan naturally couldn't accept it. She quickly stood up from the chair and shouted at her father. "Wait, wasn't this a little too presumptuous? I don't want to move, and I don't want to transfer schools." "Shut up. If you weren't entangled with that hoodlum, I wouldn't be this angry. Ryuto isn't a hoodlum. He's my boyfriend. Please watch your words when you speak." Although Kyoji was obviously very angry, Yunyan wasn't to be outdone. Don't forget, Yunyan was originally the type with big guts. She dared to go out with Ryuto to watch a death match in the underground arena in the middle of the night. She even dared to sneak into someone's bed. Her guts were simply too big. Therefore, in this living room, Yunyan couldn't help but quarrel with her father. The father and daughter scolded louder and louder, and the more they scolded, the angrier they got. "Now your wings have hardened, right? You dare to speak loudly to me? You can say whatever you want about me, but you can't scold Ryuto. He's innocent." "He's innocent? That little bastard hugs women left and right, and he's innocent. Drag him out and hang him as a street lamp." If you say that again, I'm going to get angry. Tomorrow we'll transfer schools and move. I won't allow you to see that stinky hoodlum again." "Oh, transfer schools, right? Move, right? Wait and see." After hearing her father's resolute words, Yunyan couldn't help but clench her teeth. Then, without looking back, she ran out of the living room and ran towards her bedroom. Bang! While running back to her bedroom, Yunyan immediately locked the door from the inside. Then, she picked up her phone and called Ryudo. Beep, 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 beep. Not long after, the phone was connected. Ryudo's familiar voice came from the other side. Yunyan? Calling it this time. Do you want to? Without waiting for Ryudo to finish, Yunyan said in a serious tone, Father wants me to transfer schools tomorrow. Come pick me up immediately. I want to run away from home. Run away from home? No way, right? After hearing Yunyan's words, Ryudo was stunned. Because why does this plot sound a bit familiar? In the original Yunyan's timeline of Red Album 2, No Survivors, Miss Tsuchiki chose to run away from home because her family didn't allow her to be a full-time novelist and forced her to work at her own company. She took the main character and ran away overnight. And in this world, although the current Yunyan had yet to graduate, she seemed to have fallen out with her family because of the matter between her and him. In the end, she still made the same choice. It could only be said that as expected of the young mistress of the Pry family, she had to do the same in every world. But since Yunyan already said so, Ryudo immediately hung up the phone and called Narukai to drive to Tsuchiki Kojo. But when Ryudo arrived at the entrance of Tsuchiki Kojo, a few bodyguards quickly surrounded Ryudo and raised their hands. Sorry, we won't be receiving any guests tonight. Please go back. Not receiving guests tonight. Are they afraid that Yunyan will take the opportunity to run away? Seems like Kyoji didn't completely understand his daughter. After hearing the bodyguard's words, Ryudo revealed a slight smile and then suddenly disappeared from the spot. Almost in the blink of an eye, the bodyguards surrounding Long Do fell to the ground at the same time and lost consciousness one after another. They didn't even understand how they were put down. After all, to the current Ryudo, normal bodyguards were like non-existent. Even if there were 100 or 80 of them, they couldn't stop him. At this time, Kyoji, who was at home, received a message from the butler and knew that bastard Ryudo was about to break into the house. Ryudo Kiryu? That guy dares to come? Kyoji took a deep breath and shouted to the butler, Let him go! Don't let that bastard step into the house. Yes, I'll go mobilize, sorry, I'm already in. Just as the butler was about to mobilize more people to stop the Rulon group leader, a frivolous voice came from outside the living room. What? What? Under the stunned gaze of Kyoji and the butler, the young figure, Ryudo Kiryu slowly appeared from the darkness and walked into the house with an indifferent expression. How is it possible? There are at least 30 to 40 bodyguards outside. Could it be that in such a short time? After feeling the gaze of the two, Ryudo walked toward Yunyan's room while smiling at his future father-in-law. Don't look at me like that. I'll leave right away. I won't stay for too long. You're trespassing. Ahem. Originally, Kyoji wanted to yell at him, You're trespassing. But then he realized that this guy was the leader of the Extreme Dao. It would be strange if he cared about such a small thing. Damn it, this bastard. Seeing that Ryudo was about to walk toward Yunyan's room, Kyoji suddenly took out a button from his pocket and pressed it. Buzz, 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 buzz. Accompanied by a series of rapid buzzes, 5 multi-axis rotor microdrones that were slightly larger than footballs quickly flew in from outside the house and aimed their cannons at Long Do's body. When Ryudo first met Yunyan, she also used these drones once. It was a high-tech automatic defense system that Kyoji equipped for himself, his wife, and his daughter. Although the drones looked small, the small muzzle could fire hundreds of powerful tranquilizer bullets in a second. Even an elephant would be taken down in the blink of an eye. Whoosh! Bang! But before Kyoji could order the drones to attack, 5 small steel balls flew out like bullets. The 5 drones were smashed into smithereens. Chapter 293. Is this guy a human? Although Gongxi didn't practice martial arts, his eyesight was quite good. At that moment, he vaguely saw Long Do swinging his right hand without looking back. He directly threw out 5 steel balls from his hand and shot down 5 drones. Although they were miniature drones, the precision machines made by the Tsukujiri group could meet military standards in all aspects. Even if they were shot a few times, they might not fall, let alone be smashed with steel balls. In other words, The steel balls Ryudo threw out were more powerful than bullets? Isn't this nonsense? How can a human do this? If you have this ability, why don't you go fight monsters and save the world? However, just as Gong Xi's face turned pale from the shock, Ryudo leisurely walked down the hallway and came to Yunyan's room. Knock knock. He elegantly knocked on the door and smiled. Yunyan? I'm here. Open the door. Before he finished, the door opened and Yunyan's figure suddenly pounced on Ryuto. You're fast, let's go. After hugging her boyfriend, Yunyan rewarded him with a kiss on the cheek, then excitedly hugged Ryuto and walked out. Suddenly, Gong Xi, who chased after them, saw his daughter hugging another man affectionately. He was so angry that he almost had a heart attack. Don't leave. Little bastard. If you take her away, I'll... Shoo. Long Do didn't wait for Gong Xi to finish, and he made a shushing gesture. Those who threatened me before didn't have a good ending. You're my future father-in-law. I don't want you to end up like that. Otherwise, Yunyan will be sad. Ryudo's tone sounded very calm. It was far from a threat, but the threat was self-evident. The moment he heard these words, Kyoji felt a chill run down his spine, and a chill ran down his spine. It was hard to imagine that the CEO of a large conglomerate was scared to the point that his body trembled and he couldn't move. When Ryudo left with Yunyan, the butler who was standing on the side walked over with cold sweat and said to his master, Kosher-sama, I'm sorry. Sorry? What's the point of being sorry? What do I pay you for? To watch the show? After seeing the butler who was said to be a spy, Gong Xi couldn't help but yell at him in a harsh tone. Since Ryudo entered the room, the butler had been standing there motionless. People who didn't know him would think he was a block of wood. Tong Shang Ryukyu had come knocking on their door to take the young miss away, yet the butler, who was supposed to be her bodyguard, didn't do anything to stop him. Even if he couldn't stop him in the end, he still had to put up a front. Wasn't this professional ethics? Who knew that the butler shook his head and said, It's not that I don't want to move, but if I move, I'll be beheaded on the spot. At that time, there'll be no turning back. What? Gong Xi was shocked when he heard the butler's words. Although this sentence sounded a little unbelievable, it was the truth. In fact, the moment Long Do entered the room, the butler was already prepared to attack. He was ready to draw his gun from his waist. However, before he could pull out his gun, an aura akin to that of a death god locked him in place. Don't move. If you pull out your gun, I'll kill you. Although Ryudo didn't say a word, his aura had already imprinted this sentence in the butler's mind. Will die. If I pull out my gun, I'll die here. Under this strong threat of death, the butler could only watch with cold sweat as Ryudo took the young lady away. Looking at the direction Ryudo left, the butler sighed and said, Kosher-sama, that guy is a complete monster. There aren't many forces in this world that can stop him. It's better not to completely fall out with him. What do you mean? You want me to watch my daughter be taken away by that bastard? What else? Does Kosher-sama want to pay with your life? Using your life in exchange for Miss Yunyan's disgust and hatred towards him? It's not worth it. After hearing the butler's words, Gong Xi didn't know how to react. Of course, in reality, Ryudo couldn't kill Gong Xi. After all, he was his father-in-law. Even if he fell out with him, he would at most teach him a lesson. But the problem was that Gong Xi and the butler didn't know this. They only felt that Ryudo was a monster. Too scary. Is this the leader of the Rulong Group and the Black Hand Alliance? Is this really a 16 or 17-year-old young man? Thinking of this, the president of the Sakujiri Group couldn't help but take a deep breath. But at this time, Gong Xi seemed to understand why his daughter liked Ryudo so much. After all, from the girl's point of view, the action of the leader rushing in to take away his girlfriend was very manly. It was much better than the boy toy in this era. But what should he do now? Yunyan ran away with that guy. Wasn't this sending a sheep to the tiger's mouth? At the thought that his daughter might be taken by a pig tonight, Gong Xi's face turned into the color of pig liver. But even so, other than hurriedly contacting his acquaintances to call the police and think of a way to stop Long Do, he could only stay at home and silently pray that that bastard Long Do would not make a move on Yunyan so quickly. From a certain point of view, Gongxi's prayer was complete nonsense. Because what he didn't know was that his daughter wasn't a cabbage being taken by a pig. She was the one taking the initiative to take someone. Hee hee hee, ha 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 ha. At the same time, in the back seat of the car with the Rulong Group's coat of arms, Yun Yin was laughing happily. Ever since Long Do picked her up from her home, senior sister Yun Yin had been very excited. At this time, she didn't even want to sit on Long Do's lap. She even reached out and hugged her boyfriend's neck. This extremely hot scene made the driver, Narukai, unable to stand it. He quickly pulled down the partition and put on his headphones. He made a "I can't see anything, I can't hear anything" gesture. Seeing Yunyan's happy expression, Ryudo smiled and said to her, "Okay, now you've successfully run away from home, right? That's what you wanted." Long Do knew that senior sister Yunyan had always been the type who liked to take the initiative to pursue excitement. For her, running away from home with her boyfriend after quarreling with her father, this kind of incomparably exciting action obviously touched the young girl's nerves, making her so happy that she couldn't close her mouth. But when she heard Ryudo's words, Yunyan smiled in his ear and said, "Running away from home was successful, but it's not enough. It's far from enough. I want more." "Oh? Then what do you want? Stay at my house for the night?" Ryudo said as he reached out and hugged his girlfriend's slender waist, and a hint of excitement flashed in his eyes. In fact, in the past few months, Yunyan had been firmly watched by Gongxi. Basically, she had no chance to have intimate contact with Ryudo, which made Ryudo feel particularly uncomfortable. Especially after eating dunya on this trip to Moscow, Ryuto was obviously looking forward to Yunyan. After all, even a flat loli like dunya could bring him so much joy. Yunyan, the type who had a good figure and knew how to play. It was really unbearable to think about. So on this night when Yunyan ran away from home, it was just right. Hee hee. Thinking of this, Ryudo's face couldn't help but show a weird expression, especially when he felt Yunyan's perky buttocks sitting on his lap. He was even more energetic. Yunyan's figure was excellent. She was the type who was not fat but had meat. The feeling of holding her was warm and soft. She was not on the same level as Dunya, who would touch his bones. He would definitely feel good. But just when Ryuto was imagining a strange scene in his mind, Yunyan in his arms shook her head and said, "It's not bad to stay at your house, but since I ran away from home, I want to go somewhere far away." "Somewhere far away? For example?" "For example, Paris, France? I want to see the Eiffel Tower with you, and then kiss on the top of the tower." Should I say, as expected of Yunyan, this idea is really playful. Although it's a bit complicated. Go to Paris. It's not impossible under normal circumstances, but we definitely can't take a plane now. After hearing his girlfriend's request, Ryudo couldn't help but reach out and scratch his head. It could be foreseen that Sakujiri Kyoji must be furious now because his daughter was taken away, and the police would arrest Ryudo for kidnapping. Although this crime would become a joke because of Yunyan's return, it also meant that Yunyan must take the initiative to go back, otherwise, it would not be a joke, and she would really be wanted by the police. In other words, before Yunyan went back, the two of them definitely couldn't take a civil plane to Paris, and this black car alone couldn't drive to Paris. But even so, even if there were such difficulties, Ryudo wanted to fulfill his girlfriend's wish as much as possible. So Ryudo nodded to Yunyan and smiled. "Wait a minute, let me make a call to confirm. If I remember correctly, Kaiyang seems to have something that can help. Let's ask him." Thinking of this, Ryudo dialed Kaiyang's mobile phone and asked if that thing was still in his hands. "That thing? No problem. Anyway, it's just there. You can come and drive it away." For Ryudo's request, Kaiyang didn't hesitate for a moment and directly told him that thing was now in the warehouse in the area. In this way, Ryudo quickly asked Narukai to drive in the direction Kaiyang said. It didn't take long for him to take Yunyan to a large warehouse near the remote seaside of Tokyo Bay. Parked in the center of the warehouse was a private jet that didn't look very big. It could seat 2 or 3 people at most. When she saw the plane, Yunyan suddenly covered her mouth with excitement because she didn't think that there was a self-driving tour to Paris. It was so exciting that this young lady was so excited that she couldn't even straighten her back. Chapter 294. Kaiyang's private jet was said to be a good thing he received from a fugitive warlord. It didn't cost much, but it was excellent. It was definitely worth it. Because of the omnipotent pilot, passive skill of 100% proficiency, Ryudo could almost perfectly pilot all the vehicles in the world. So he got on the plane on the spot and flew all the way to the west with Yunyan. Boom, 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 boom. As the jet ignited and quickly moved forward on the simple runway in front, it soared into the sky and soared in the dark night sky. Yunyan, sitting behind Ryuto, was unconsciously immersed in the beautiful night sky. Dusk shrouded the dusky Tokyo, and the dark sky was twinkling with sparkling diamond-like stars. Especially when sitting on this small jet, it was closer to the starry sky than sitting on a large passenger plane, as if the dazzling stars were within reach. It's so beautiful. Is this the feeling of flying in the sky? The surrounding night sky and clouds flashed behind quickly. To be honest, the feeling of riding this kind of jet was somewhat bumpy, but the surrounding stars quickly made Yunyan addicted to it. Because it was already night, Yunyan slowly fell asleep under the panoramic night sky unknowingly. Ah, it's really a perfect trip away from home. Before finally falling asleep, Yunyan couldn't help but think so, and then she fell into a sweet dream. From Tokyo to Paris, even if it was a straight line, it was a long distance of more than 9,000 kilometers, and it had to pass through many countries. Fortunately, the jet provided by Kaiyang had all the necessary documents to fly in various countries, and he immediately used his own connections to ensure that Long Do would not be intercepted on the way to Paris. So after nearly 10 hours of flight and landing to refuel, when the next morning came, the plane was already parked in a manor on the outskirts of Paris. This manor was said to be the property of a Chinese Chamber of Commerce in Paris. Kaiyang, who had a lot of people, greeted the boss there and got permission to land, allowing Ryudo to temporarily park the plane there. Sway. At this time, Yunyan was still sleeping, but she suddenly felt that her body seemed to be floating, and then her surroundings began to shake slightly. What's going on? After an unknown amount of time, Yunyan opened her eyes in a daze. Immediately after, an incomparably gorgeous scene appeared before the young girl's eyes. Although it was the beginning of winter in October, outside the window of Yunyan's vision, a field of huge sunflowers was blooming like flames in the wilderness of Paris. The sunflowers seemed to be burning with life, setting off the beautiful and tranquil scenery of the lake and mountains not far away. Together with the faintly visible ancient and exquisite art buildings in the surrounding mountain villages, it looked even more fascinating under the morning sun. Oh, you're awake. When Yunyan was unconsciously shocked by the beautiful scenery outside the window, a familiar voice came from the side. Yunyan turned her head and saw Ryudo handing over a bottle of mineral water with a smile. Coincidentally, Yunyan also felt thirsty at this time, so she took the bottle and drank. After drinking, Yunyan found that the two were sitting in a luxurious car. The driver in front was a white-haired old gentleman. The car was driving on a neat, desolate mountain road, surrounded by beautiful natural scenery. Seeing Yunyan woke up, the old gentleman in front turned his head slightly and greeted with a smile, "Bonjour, mademoiselle. Good morning, miss." Because Yunyan often traveled to and from different countries since she was young, she could speak most of the languages of many countries. Thus, she replied without hesitation, "Bonjour." Wait, could it be? After saying bonjour, she realized that the old gentleman was actually speaking French to her. Could it be that he was speaking French? No way, right? Thinking of this, Yunyan couldn't help but feel a little dreamy. She just ran away from home last night, and then said that she was running away from home to go to Paris with a hint of willfulness. As a result, she woke up in Paris? She was tens of thousands of miles away? Don't be surprised. We are indeed in France now, and we are rushing to the city of Paris. This is Mr. Bernard, the person responsible for receiving us. It seemed that he felt that Yunyan's confused look was a little cute. Ryudo patted her head gently, and then introduced the old gentleman in front of him. Mr. Bernard was the old butler responsible for managing the manor where the plane was parked. Kaiyang asked the owner of the manor to take care of his friend, So Ryudo and Yunyin were warmly entertained by the owner after they got off the plane. Originally, Ryudo just wanted to borrow a car from them and drive from the suburbs to Paris, but the old butler insisted on sending them, which led to the current scene. While the wheels were moving, it didn't take long for a city with a strong artistic atmosphere and rich life to slowly appear in front of Yunyan's eyes. When it came to Paris, there was always a very strange feeling because there was always a feeling that time seemed to stop flowing here. People often praise the changes in emerging cities, but such changes absolutely did not exist in Paris. Those old and full of artistic buildings stood in the same place day after day, year after year. The historic Champs-Élysées, the white and sacred Arc de Triomphe, the magnificent Palace of Versailles, the elegant and dignified Notre Dame de Paris, the towering Eiffel Tower in the square of the God of War, and the Seine River flowing quietly under the tower, all of them spoke of the charm of this city. When Ryudo entered the city, he felt the natural romantic sentiment of the French, as well as the spirit that somewhat confused the Orientals. The Orientals pursued the idea of man conquering nature. Even if there were thousands of huge waves, they would go against the current, like a fish leaping over the dragon gate to become a dragon. If they failed, they would die. But the French liked to go with the flow. Wherever the waves hit, people would lie there. Compared to going against the current, they obviously preferred to raise their hands. It didn't take long for the two to bid farewell to the enthusiastic old gentleman Bernard and stroll on the Champs-Élysées. It was early in the morning. Because they had been flying all night and hadn't eaten anything until now, Yunyin found that she was already dizzy from hunger. She pulled Ryudo to find a coffee shop and sat down outside. The outdoor coffee shops in Paris were very famous. Walking on the streets and alleys, one could see exquisite chairs placed outside, people sitting and drinking coffee while enjoying delicious food. However, because of the hunger, Yunyin didn't plan to choose carefully. After sitting down, she hurriedly ordered a few food and drinks, then held Ryudo's hand and waited for the food to arrive. Perhaps it was because the two were in the city of romance. Yunyin seemed to be cuter than usual after coming here, especially her little eyes looking into the shop, eager to see when her breakfast would be served. Ryudo couldn't stop looking at her. He wanted to hug her, pat her head, and pat her back. Fortunately, it didn't take long for the well-dressed waiter to serve the signature delicacies of the coffee shop. An apple pie with sea salt ice cream, an omelette egg, a raspberry Napoleon cake, a seafood sandwich, and a pot of hot chocolate. The omelette egg was wrapped with cheese, various vegetables, and ham. It was very refreshing to eat together with the salad that was served together. The combination of ice and fire of the apple pie and ice cream brought a strong stimulation when it entered the mouth, which was very much in line with Yunyin's preferences. I'm alive again. After sweeping almost all the things on the table, Yunyin stretched slightly, revealing her perfect body under the romantic and roguish sunshine of Paris. Seeing this scene, Ryudo felt energized and quickly asked, "Are we going to the Eiffel Tower now?" Because Yunyin previously said that she wanted to kiss on the Eiffel Tower, Ryudo was especially looking forward to this trip to the Eiffel Tower. When he thought about being intimate with senior sister Yunyin on a tower that was hundreds of meters high and overlooking the whole of Paris, his young and rogue little heart couldn't take it anymore. Unexpectedly, Yunyin shook her head and smiled. "It's better to go at night. I want to go to another place during the day." Another place? Where? Louvre? Notre Dame de Paris? No. Those places are not interesting, and I was tired of going there when I was 5. This damned rich lady. After hearing Yunyin's Versailles words, Ryudo smiled bitterly. "Then aren't you used to coming to Paris? Where else do you want to go?" "Well, I won't be tired of going to that place no matter how many times I go, and that place is also the starting point of my dream." When she said the words, "starting point of my dream," Yunyin's face couldn't help but show a trace of longing. Dream? If Ryudo remembered correctly, Yunyin's dream should be to be a novelist, right? The starting point of a novelist's dream. What kind of place would that be? This special information, even in the original Red Album 2, No Survivors, was not announced. The players knew that Yunyin wanted to be a novelist, but they didn't know when and how she started to have this idea. After all, Yunyin was the young lady of a high-tech company, and she had a strong personal charm. How could this dream be related to novels? With the thought of wanting to know more about Yunyan, Ryudo followed Yunyan to the huge building on the west bank of the Seine River, French National Library. Chapter 295. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France was the largest library in France and one of the few large libraries in the world. This world-famous library was built on an industrial wasteland on the bank of the Seine River in Paris, forming the gorgeous scenery on the right bank of the Seine River. From the outside, the huge library was like four huge books that were opened, proudly standing under the clear sky, as if all the cultural crystallization of the world was stored in these four books. For most visitors or readers, their reading activities at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France began by reading these four huge books before entering the library. Of course, for Yunyan and Ryudo, who came here after breakfast, this situation was no exception. Oh, what a big book! Are they not afraid of an earthquake collapsing it? After looking at the appearance of the library from the outside, Long Do thought of some very inauspicious things. Then, he followed Yunyan and walked into the library with great familiarity. The Bibliothèque Nationale de France covered a large area, and there were many books stored inside. At first glance, it felt like it was surrounded by a sea of books. After entering the library, Yunyan pulled Ryudo to a corner without hesitation. After walking for a while, they stopped in front of a bookshelf. At this time, Yunyan looked at the familiar bookshelf and books in front of her, and said to Ryudo without looking back, "Didn't I just say that this is the starting point of my dream?" Speaking of which, that was 5 years ago. The first time Yunyan had the idea of becoming a novelist, or rather an author, was when she came to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France with her mother when she was 12 years old, exactly 5 years ago. At that time, Yunyan was a girl who had no interest in literature. Compared to those thick books that didn't look fashionable at all, she preferred beautiful clothes or some rare toys. That's right, the Yunyan at that time did have such a side. She was also naughty, exaggerated, arrogant, proud, and willful. Because there was one thing that Yunyan was very clear about since she was a child, and that was that she was a person chosen by the heavens who could have everything without any effort. Indeed, Yunyan in Tsukujiri was a person chosen by the heavens. Among the billions of people in the world today, there were only a few people who could be compared to the top Miss of Versailles. If there was a word to describe Yunyan's background, then only the word cheat was the most appropriate word. As the Miss of the Tsukujiri group, Yunyan, from the day she was born, she had endless wealth. In addition to this wealth, she also had a unique top beauty, a top figure, and extraordinary personal charm. This was especially true for her extraordinary charisma, which had been displayed since she was young. Ever since she was young, no matter what Yunyan did, she would always receive unreserved praise from others. Singing, dancing, tea ceremony, flower ceremony, recitation, drama. When a person has LV5 charm, her every move would naturally be able to shake people's hearts. Even if Yunyan's artistic talent was only at an average level, she would still be able to win the cheers of the audience. No matter what she did, there would be praise, and it would be praise from the bottom of her heart, not the kind that was superficial. From a certain point of view, level 5 charm was like a type of magic that could make people automatically submit to her, a type of magic that didn't require any effort to be praised. But as she grew older, this kind of special treatment finally made Yunyan feel a bit bored one day. Is there something wrong with my life? Is it really okay to continue like this? That year, when she was 12 years old, she couldn't help but think about it one night. No matter what Yunyan did, she could receive praise from others. No matter what she did, she could easily succeed. Was this kind of success that relied on God's gift of charm really her success? Yunyan thought about it for a long time, but she couldn't come up with an answer. Until one day during the holidays, she accompanied her mother to this French National Library. There, she saw her own path. Since the girl was 12 years old, it was the first time she saw such a big library, with so many different kinds of books. In the library, where the walls were carved with exquisite patterns, the rows of bookshelves were as long as the horizon, as if they were going to reach the clouds. Inside the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, There were more than 10 million books. The seemingly vast sea of books brought great shock to the 12-year-old Yun Yin. The first thing that entered Yun Yin's eyes were the millions of authors' names. On the rows of bookshelves, there were detailed records of countless authors' names. Europeans, Asians, Africans, Americans, contemporary people, modern people, ancient people, men, women, old people, children. In front of the sea of names in the books, many things didn't seem important. What kind of people were the authors of these books in the time period that they lived in? They were good people, bad people, scholars, ordinary people, poor, rich, in the flames of war, or ordinary people. This was the so-called appearance of life. But it didn't matter, no matter what they were like when they were alive in the end. This group of people used the words that were passed down and obtained eternal life. A person's death was like an extinguished lamp, but as long as their words were passed down, their name, their spirit, and their ideals were passed down, it was equivalent to living in another form in history. When the 12-year-old Yun Yin looked at the rows of names on the bookshelves, she suddenly understood this principle. She couldn't help but shed tears of excitement. Yes, this is the path that I want to walk. No matter how good my family background is, no matter how beautiful my appearance is, no matter how amazing my charm is, all of these factors, both internal and external, will gradually disappear with the passage of time and the transformation of time and space. But no matter how much time passes, the words still have the power of a rock. Even if 100 years, 1,000 years, 10,000 years have passed, it will still leave behind its own traces. I've decided, I want to be an author. I don't want to rely on Tianxi's family background, looks, and charm to live an ignoble life. I want to rely on my own abilities. I want to rely on the pen in my hand to let these words, clouds and geese in the moon, gain eternal life in the world of words. At that time, the 12-year-old Yun Yin stood in front of this row of bookshelves and made a vow of her life. 5 years later, the 17-year-old Yun Yin was still standing in the same place, looking at the same batch of books in front of her. It was as if her 17-year-old and 12-year-old self overlapped. But different from the 12-year-old Yun Yin, the current her had someone by her side who would unwaveringly support her no matter what. It sounds stupid. After describing her past, Yun Yin turned to Ryudo and said with a smile, "The young mistress who has everything from birth wants to take the most difficult path. How could that be?" Longdo shook his head and said seriously, "It would be better to say, I have a feeling of respect for you now." This was not out of politeness, but Ryudo's praise from the bottom of his heart. Moreover, the reason for this praise had nothing to do with Yun Yin's extraordinary charm. Instead, it came from her noble and unyielding character. Just as Yun Yin had said, she was a woman who was destined to have everything from the day she was born. Her charm, beautiful appearance, and illustrious family background could only be described as invincible. It could allow her to live a carefree and colorful life, and she would be happier than anyone else in the world. Even so, she still took the initiative to choose the most difficult path. No matter how good Yun Yin's family background was, no matter how beautiful Yun Yin's appearance was, no matter how powerful Yun Yin's charm was, it had nothing to do with the words she wrote. On the path of writing, Yun Yin gave up all the advantages of her talent and built a bridge to her dream from scratch. Everything she did was to prove to the world that even if she did not rely on her family background, appearance, or charm, Yun Yin could still attract people's attention to her name. Ryudo felt that giving up her heaven-given ability for her dream was very noble. In Longdo's eyes, she had been working hard to realize her dream for the past few years, and her determination was extremely firm. Even at this moment, senior sister Yun Yin stood in front of the bookshelf and was surrounded by the vast and boundless books in front of her. There was a unique sense of beauty that Longdo had never seen before. It was a sense of beauty that seemed to be emitting the light of faith. Hey, is that so? After being praised by Ryudo, Yun Yin felt a little embarrassed, but she quietly picked up her phone and stuffed it into Ryudo's arms. She said with a smile, "Since you're already in the library, why don't you take the opportunity to see if my novel has improved? How far is it from the group of great writers around me?" Okay. Then I'll read your masterpiece and see when your book can be collected in this library. Ryudo took Yunyan's phone and focused his attention. He carefully read the lines of words on the phone with the greatest enthusiasm. It was as if he was reading the Bible in his mind, solemn and serious. Unfortunately, in just 5 seconds, Ryudo regretted it. As he read Yunyan's recent literary masterpiece, fine beads of sweat flowed down from his forehead. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly, and his body faintly trembled. How should he describe Yunyan's book? After thinking for a moment, Ryudo handed the phone back to Yunyan and said with a wry smile, "Not bad. As a light novel that's relaxing and funny, there should be bookstores that are willing to publish it." A light novel that's funny? However, Yunyan frowned when she heard that. But my book's main theme is obviously a touching sadomasochistic plot. It's not relaxing at all, right? For a moment, the two of them looked at each other in the corner of the library, and the atmosphere was awkward. Chapter 296. However, although something awkward happened at the end of this supposedly heartwarming trip to the Bibliothèque Nationale de France, Ryudo and Yunyan still had a lot of fun during the day. After the two left the library, they went to the Seine River to enjoy the scenery of Paris on a boat. In the afternoon, they went to the famous shopping street to buy a lot of clothes and gifts. Finally, when the sun was about to set, they had a sumptuous dinner at the Le Petit Troquet beside the Eiffel Tower. After dinner, the sky gradually became dark. Logically speaking, it was almost time to go to the Eiffel Tower. According to Yunyan's knowledge, the Eiffel Tower was open from 9:30 in the morning to 10:30 in the evening. If they went too late, they couldn't go up the tower and could only sightsee below. That would be too boring. However, Ryudo rejected the proposal to go directly to the Eiffel Tower after dinner. Instead, he mysteriously said to Yunyan, "Don't worry, it's boring to go too early. Let's go later." Should I go there later? How late would it be? Don't tell me we'll wait until the elevator and stairs are closed before we go. Then how do we go up the tower? At this time, Yunyan also couldn't guess Ryudo's thoughts. However, out of trust for her boyfriend, she continued to follow Ryudo on the streets of Paris. Just like this, the two watched a movie, went shopping, and sat in a dessert shop. Not long after, it was already close to 11 o'clock at night. The entrance of the Eiffel Tower is really closed. Now we can't go up. When Yunyan and Ryudo finally arrived at the bottom of the Eiffel Tower, the former looked at the closed elevator and stares at the bottom of the tower. She couldn't help but show a helpless expression. The Eiffel Tower was a 300-meter-tall steel tower. It was divided into 3 floors. The elevators located at the 4 pillars could reach the first, second, and third floors. If one took the stairs, they could only reach the first and second floors. But now, it was already past 10:30. Not to mention the elevator, even the stairs were gone. Yunyan could only stand on the ground and stare blankly at the huge shadow that was particularly conspicuous in the night sky. But at this moment, Ryudo smiled and said, "Don't be in such a hurry. At this time, the tourists and staff have basically all left. If we go up now, won't we be able to spend some quality time together? You have to be able to go up first." Yunyan pouted when she heard that. She pointed to the staircase and said, "Don't tell me you're planning to pry it open? I'll call the police." Pry? I never said I was going to take the stairs or the elevator. Wasn't the outside of the Iron Tower empty? Why don't we just climb up? Climb? Climb up from the outside? The moment she heard this sentence, Yunyan was petrified. In fact, because the Eiffel Tower was a special steel structure, it was not sealed with concrete. With the naked eye, one could see that there were climbing points everywhere inside and outside the tower. It was not like no one had ever climbed the tower from the outside. According to the Paris police, every year, a group of extreme climbing enthusiasts from all over the world would gather here and try to secretly climb the 324-meter-tall antenna tower with their bare hands. Some of these climbing enthusiasts succeeded, some failed. Some were arrested by the police, and some fell to their deaths. They were simply using their own lives to demonstrate the true meaning of courting death. However, unlike them, Long Do wasn't climbing from the outside alone this time. Instead, he had to bring along senior sister Yun Yin. Is it really okay? Yun Yin watched as Long Do reached a corner of the iron tower and prepared to climb up. She felt goosebumps all over her body as Long Do wrapped his arm around her slender waist, and her entire body was practically hanging on his body. Yun Yin watched as Long Do approached the corner of the iron tower and prepared to climb up. She felt her hair stand on end. 324 meters, this was a 324-meter tall building, and he was climbing without any protection. The most ridiculous part was that he had to bring someone up with him and climb with one hand. This was definitely the craziest tower climbing plan in history. But Ryudo heard this and gently kissed Yun Yin's forehead and smiled. "Don't worry, this height and shape is no different from flat ground to me. You just have to enjoy the scenery." But, before senior sister Yun Yin could finish her sentence, Long Do suddenly leaped forward and stepped on a steel bar on the outer layer of the tower. Then, he lightly jumped 5 to 6 meters into the air. Then he reached out the hand that was not holding Yun Yin and hooked onto the steel bar on the outside. His body flipped up again, and the two were already standing on a steel bar more than 10 meters high. Then, the tower parkour that senior sister Yun Yin had never imagined even in her wildest dreams began. Why did they use the word parkour instead of climbing to describe Ryu Kung Fu's movements? That was because he wasn't climbing at all. He was just running up the tower's outer perimeter. The huge Eiffel Tower was made up of crisscrossing steel bars that were connected to each other. With such a structure, it was destined that there would be places for people to rest their feet at certain intervals. Thus, Ryudo's body was seen running up the slanted tower in the dark night. With a person in his arms, he jumped up as if he was walking on flat ground. Every jump was able to cross a height of several meters. So climbing up the Eiffel Tower from the outside is actually such a simple thing? Before Yun Yin could regain her senses, she felt as if she was riding on the clouds as she continued to ascend. It did not take long for her to arrive at the highest point of the antenna tower. Standing at the top of the 324-meter-tall tower, looking down from this angle, she could completely overlook half of the night view of Paris. Of course, this was under the premise that she was not afraid of heights. Otherwise, just the flat steel bar structure without any protection around it was enough to scare a timid person to the point of fainting on the spot. Fortunately, Yun Yin was a woman who had nothing to do with the word timid. "Wow, it's so beautiful." Thus, after being carried to the top of the tower by Ryudo, she immediately looked at the night view of more than 300 meters high. The night in Paris was still flashing with neon lights and feasting. There were cars and people everywhere below, and a few planes flew over from time to time. But at the top of the Eiffel Tower, at the top of the 324-meter-tall antenna tower, was a private space that belonged only to Yun Yin and Ryudo. After admiring the beautiful scenery for a while, Yun Yin could not help but turn her head to look at Ryudo. At the same time, she reached out and wrapped her arms around his neck. She smiled and said, "That's great. It's the best gift for leaving home." "Oh, is it?" Ryudo also smiled and said, "If that's the case, then what about it? What kind of gift are you going to give me in return?" "Well, then I'll give myself back to you as a gift. You have to accept it gently." Suddenly, Yun Yin also slowly closed her gentle eyes, took the initiative to move forward, and pressed her cherry lips on Ryudo's mouth. In the early winter, the wind at 300 meters high was still somewhat cold, but the atmosphere at the top of the tower was particularly hot, as if even the frost was about to be melted by the passion of the two. After kissing for a long time, the blushing Yun Yin took a deep breath and said emotionally, "Let's go down. It's getting late. We should find a place to rest." When the word rest was said, Yun Yin felt her heart beat faster, and Ryudo felt the same. In the kiss and hug just now, the temperature of the two was constantly rising. Obviously, this kind of primary contact could not satisfy Yun Yin now. She needed deeper and more intimate contact. Ryudo naturally understood Yun Yin's meaning, so he also nodded. He hugged Yun Yin's back with one hand and her slender legs with the other, and jumped down the tower without hesitation. Shwa! The next moment, a pair of hooligan gliders that hadn't been used for a long time spread out from Longdo's back. The two of them glided downwards under the night wind, glided, until they landed on a street in an unknown corner of Paris. After ignoring the surrounding passers-by who were obviously frightened, Ryuto and Yunyin looked at each other and smiled. They began to look for a special building on both sides of the street. A hotel? Hotel? It was indeed a hotel. After all, it was almost midnight now, and it was time to find a place to rest. This was a very normal thing. As for whether they would do anything before resting, cough cough, that was hard to say. Perhaps the two of them would chat for a while, play poker, or something like that. After searching for a while, they finally found a decent hotel in the corner of the street. But before entering the hotel, Yunyin pointed at the shop next to her and said embarrassedly, why don't we buy something first? Buy something? What do you want to buy? It's that round thing. As Yunyin said, she gestured with her hand, but it could probably be understood what she wanted to buy. Unlike Dunia, who had no experience in this area and had no common sense, Yunyin knew what basic protective measures should be taken before that. Otherwise, if they accidentally hit the target the first time, they wouldn't be able to enjoy it for a long time. Thus, the two of them sneaked towards the store like thieves, preparing to buy some small props that young people would love to see. But just as Ryuto opened the door of the shop first, a beautiful woman with delicate facial features, tall and slender figure, who gave off a cold feeling, just happened to turn her head and look over there. Wait, it's her. The moment he saw the beautiful woman, Ryuto's eyes suddenly widened. At the same time, Ryuto's old acquaintance who appeared here for some reason. The Metropolitan Police Department, Search Section 1 Chief, Takushima Rinka also showed a surprised expression. Chapter 297. Ryudo couldn't be more familiar with Takushima Rihana, the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department Search Department, who was also known as the Ghost of Search. Even in the Kokyo incident a few months ago, he was almost robbed of some important things by Lin Hua. The relationship between the two was also a mess, and he didn't know how to describe it. Ryuto-kun? Why are you here? Ryuto was very surprised when he saw Lin Hua, and Lin Hua also slightly widened her cold and slender eyes and asked in a slightly surprised tone. Because she was not at work at this time, but on vacation, Lin Hua did not wear her usual police uniform or professional attire, but changed into a romantic dress that was very suitable for the city of Paris. The long dress that reached her ankles wrapped around her curvaceous figure. At the same time, it exposed her perfectly round shoulders, charming collarbone, and slender arms. Coupled with the pair of wine-colored high heels on her feet, she appeared even more seductive. What a beautiful and mature woman. Such a figure, dress, and her natural cold expression simply made people who were interested in her feel that they couldn't stop. They couldn't wait to kneel under her dress and be stepped on by the wine-colored high heels. But when he heard Lin Hua's question, Ryudo replied awkwardly that, I'm actually, Sister Lin Hua. It's actually you, long time no see. Why are you here? But just when Ryudo was about to find a perfunctory reason, Yunyin, who was just picking out some strange boxes of small umbrellas at the counter, ran over in surprise, and then shouted something that made Ryudo even more surprised. Sister Lin Hua? You know Chief Taishima? The Taishima family and our Tsukujiri family are distant relatives. Sister Lin Hua's my cousin. Of course we know each other. At this time, Yunyin walked over and put her hand on Lin Hua's shoulder and said to Ryudo with a smile, the Takushima clan and the Tsukumi clan. So that's how it was. They had this kind of relationship. In the game, Red Album 2, No Survivors, there wasn't much information about Hana Takushima's family. After all, she was just a villain, and not a particularly important one. Therefore, there wasn't any detailed personal information. But judging from the current situation, Lin Hua's family background didn't seem to be simple. She was actually a distant relative of the Tsukujiri family, and she was actually a cousin of Yunyin. This information was not in the game. After all, Yunyin's personal storyline was the only one of the three main storylines that did not involve too much fighting with the Heavenly Eye group, Therefore, Takushima Rihana's character had never appeared at all. Naturally, there was no scene of her and Yunyin together. This was great. Their relationship was getting more and more messy. Seeing Lin Hua and Yunyin leaning together and talking intimately, Ryudo couldn't help but show a bitter smile. He and Lin Hua were almost like a rich woman and a duck. Lin Hua coveted his man, and he coveted Lin Hua's information and help. Although the two were not lovers, they each had their own needs, and they had some intimate contact. But now, he found out that Lin Hua was actually his girlfriend's cousin. What was this? I'm a kept duck of my girlfriend's cousin? This was too messy. Just as Ryuto was having a headache about the wonderful triangle relationship between himself, Yunyin, and Lin Hua on the other side smiled and said to Yunyin, I heard that you and Ryuto-kun are dating before. This time, you're preparing to come out and enjoy the two of you world, right? No, it's just a normal trip. Although Yunyin was always very bold when facing Ryuto, she showed a rare sisterly side in front of Sister Lin Hua. She quickly raised her hand and waved to show that she didn't mean that. Of course, when Yunyin waved her hand, she forgot that she was still holding a mysterious small box in her hand. The small box contained some small umbrellas that would be used at special times. When Lin Hua's gaze looked at the small box in Yunyin's hand, Yunyin's face suddenly flushed red. She didn't know whether to put the thing in her hand back or hide it. It was extremely awkward. How should she describe this situation? She brought her boyfriend to get a room, and when she was buying an umbrella, she happened to meet an elder, and her purpose was seen through by the elder. It was so awkward that she wanted to die. Okay. When she saw Yunyin's awkward look, Lin Hua said lightly, love between a man and a woman is human nature, and it's also a step that everyone has to go through. There's nothing to be shy about. Yes. When Yunyin heard this, she took a deep breath, and her face slowly returned to normal. When the two sisters were talking, Ryudo looked at them curiously. After all, this kind of Yunyin and Lin Hua was something that Ryudo had never seen before. It was a very novel side. Lin Hua, who usually met with Long Do, was the head of the search department. She was a spy from the Heavenly Eye group. She was a cold and perverted woman who was different from the outside. She was Long Do's partner. Yunyin, who usually met with Ryuto, was a student of Dori First High School. She was the young miss of the Tsukamori group. She was a bold woman who did what she said, and she was Ryuto's girlfriend. But now, they were not the ones that Ryuto knew. They called each other sisters, and they had put themselves in the role of elder sister and younger sister. As the elder sister, Lin Hua had a trace of gentleness in her usual coldness, and she had the steadiness and magnanimity that an elder sister should have. As the younger sister, Yunyin had a trace of gentleness in her usual gentleness, and she had the delicateness and cuteness that a younger sister should have. Oh, when the two sisters stood together, they were really as beautiful as flowers. At this time, Ryuto, who looked at the sisters, could not help but nod. After all, it was a feast for the eyes to see such a beautiful scene of sisters gathered together in the city of romance. According to Lin Hua, she was on vacation recently, so she came to Paris alone to relax and shop. This was one of Lin Hua's favorite pastimes. Looking at the big shopping bag at her feet, Long Do also knew that what Lin Hua said was true. The meeting between the three of them was indeed a coincidence, and it was not planned in advance by the other side. But Ryudo could not be blamed for thinking too much. After all, Lin Hua's identity was more or less sensitive. In addition to being the section chief of the Metropolitan Police Department, she was also the head of the Heavenly Eye Group. She was a super spy sent by IM to the government. She was also Ryudo's enemy. However, Yunyin naturally did not know about such things. So she clapped her hands happily and smiled. Sister Lin Hua, where are you going? How about bringing me along? I just bought some wine, and I plan to go back to the hotel and drink to my heart's content. Can you drink? Yes, I can drink, right? Long. At this time, Yunyin suddenly remembered that she did not come alone. Behind her, there was a boyfriend who was eagerly waiting to get a room. She wanted to have a good gathering with her cousin whom she had not seen for a long time. But what about Ryudo? What about Ryudo? She couldn't bring Ryudo to Lin Hua's room, right? That would feel too strange. After all, Ryudo was a man, and Lin Hua was a woman. She must be more or less. Okay. But before Yunyin could think of this, Lin Hua glanced at Ryudo and said faintly, Ryudo-kun, come with us. Let's drink. The more people, the merrier. Hey, Sister Lin Hua, shouldn't you and Ryudo be that? Speaking of this, Yunyin realized that Lin Hua was a police officer and Ryudo was an extreme do. The two should have a natural relationship, but Lin Hua asked Ryudo to go to her room to drink. I have some friendship with Ryudo-kun. He definitely won't refuse, right? As Lin Hua spoke, she gave Ryudo a slight wink. Hurry up and agree, or I'll tell Yunyin about what we did in the flower bed. Okay? Damn it, this stinky woman. After understanding Lin Hua's meaning, Ryudo had to smile and said, yes, we are still friends. Drinking together is not a problem. Really? That's great. When she noticed that there was no conflict between her boyfriend and her cousin, Yunyin also jumped up happily. She quickly pulled Lin Hua to the freezer next to her to pick up wine and snacks. Here, take it. Lin Hua handed the paper bag at her feet to Ryudo and whispered in his ear, don't drop the things inside. Otherwise, I will use yours as a replacement. Using me as a replacement? No way, right? Could it be? The moment he heard this sentence, Ryudo only felt a tremor, and he seemed to understand what was in the heavy paper bag in his hand. Are you crazy? Ordinary women come to Paris to shop for clothes and shoes. You came to Paris to shop for this thing? And you want me to help you carry it? Carrying the heavy paper bag with countless strange things in it, Ryudo only felt that it was not right to take it or throw it away. His expression became extremely strange. Lin Hua, on the other hand, was picking out the wine, snacks, poker, dice, and other entertainment equipment for the evening with Yunyin. At the same time, she inadvertently looked at Ryudo, and the corner of her mouth raised slightly. Obviously, this woman did it on purpose, absolutely on purpose. Damn it. Is she trying to ruin my romantic trip to Paris with Yunyin? Beast. But no matter what, ever since Long Do and Yunyin met Lin Hua here, they were supposed to be very romantic tonight, but it was estimated that half of it had already been ruined. Not long after, when Ryudo carried 2 big bags and followed behind the sisters, and walked toward the hotel not far away with a face full of displeasure, he felt a chill on his back, as if he had an ominous premonition. Originally, if Lin Hua did not appear, Ryudo should be happily rolling in the sheets with Yunyin now. In the end, there was nothing left, and he had to accompany this crazy woman to drink. What a joke. Beep. However, just as the 3 of them arrived outside Lin Hua's room, the owner opened the door with the room card, and the 3 of them walked into the dim room. Ryudo actually did not realize what kind of terrifying thing he was going to face in a while. Chapter 298. Clang. As the door was closed from the inside, the huge city of Paris outside seemed to be isolated from the outside, and inside was a strange, small world of its own. A small world that only belonged to the 3 of them. The hotel suite that Lin Hua lived in was the most luxurious kind. The room was very large, and the decoration was very elegant. The floor was covered with a clean and soft carpet, and the bed that was enough for 2 or 3 people to roll around on it made people want to lie down and not get up. Sit anywhere, don't be shy. After entering the room, Lin Hua bent down easily, reached out and took off the pair of wine-colored high heels on her feet, revealing the beautiful feet wrapped in black lace stockings. Perhaps it was because she had practiced martial arts. Although Lin Hua's hands and feet were slender, they gave people a feeling that they were quite smooth and powerful. It was different from Rui Hui, Yunyin, and Dunia. This woman. Something is wrong. Looking at Lin Hua twisting her waist and stepping on the carpet with her stockinged feet, Ryudo could not help but sigh. He also took off his shoes at the door with Yunyin and walked in together. It was obvious that Lin Hua had been living here for a few days. There were some daily necessities scattered around the room, and the unique cold fragrance of her body floated everywhere. Lin Hua's body fragrance was also different from that of other women. It was the kind that smelled cool and refreshing, like the fragrance of mint. However, if one sniffed carefully, it was not difficult to smell a strange, fishy smell in the room. How should one describe this fishy smell? Forget it, there was no need to describe it. It was better not to delve into it. Judging from the messy bag in Ryudo's hands, it was not difficult for him to imagine what Lin Hua had done in the room for the past few days. But obviously, Yunyin was completely unaware of her cousin's special hobby. After entering the room, she threw herself on Lin Hua's bed, crossed her feet in white stockings, and said with a smile, "I haven't slept in Sister Lin Hua's bed for a long time. Hee, I really miss it." "Really? You seemed to come to my house often when you were young and always slept with me." I don't know why, but Sister Lin Hua's bed always has a strange smell. It smells quite good, and I especially like this smell." Sniff. Yunyin immediately pounced on his bed and sniffed curiously. God, please don't let Yunyin know what that smell is. Looking at Yunyin's innocent and cute actions, Ryudo couldn't help but silently pray in his heart. However, as Lin Hua sat down on the bed and placed her long legs on the bed, Ryudo couldn't take his eyes off her. Because of shopping in Paris today, Yunyin was now wearing a large warm pink knitted dress and milky white lycra cotton stockings. She looked more cute than the usual elegant and dignified senior sister. Compared to Yunyin, Lin Hua was dressed in a more mature and ladylike manner. Her slim-fit velvet dress accentuated her graceful figure, and the black lace stockings that peeked out from the side of the dress emphasized the charm of her slender legs. Two sisters, one bed, one black stockings, one mature, one cute. The different styles brought about the same powerful temptation to men. Coupled with the extremely suggestive background of the big bed, Ryudo looked at the two pairs of beautiful legs in front of him and didn't know what to do. Seeing Ryudo standing there in a daze, Lin Hua raised her eyebrows slightly and said lightly, "Don't just stand there, do what you should do." Huh. Ryudo swallowed a mouthful of saliva when he heard the words and asked in a trembling voice, "That, I should, go and bring all the drinks and snacks to the bed. I have to have a few drinks with my lovely sister." Chirp. As Lin Hua said, she reached out and hugged Yunyin's shoulder and pulled her into her arms. She even kissed the tender and smooth face without hesitation, leaving a faint lipstick mark. Generally speaking, Yunyin and Lin Hua were both women, and they were cousins, so it was normal for them to do some intimate actions. But after kissing Yunyin's little face, Lin Hua deliberately looked at Ryudo with a provocative look, and even stuck out her tongue to lick her lips. It was like a Tauren looking at the victim after getting what she wanted. Why do I feel like something is wrong? Is she playing with me? No. Is she flirting with me? Although Yunyin did not think much about such a move, Ryudo vaguely noticed Lin Hua's meaning, because this woman was obviously flirting with him. That's right, although Lin Hua was kissing Yunyin at this time, the person she was actually flirting with was Ryuto. Look, your lovely girlfriend is in my arms, and I'm kissing her face. Are you happy? It doesn't matter if you're happy or not. I'm happy anyway, puff puff puff. Indirect flirting. This was indirect flirting. Using Yunyin's body to flirt with Ryudo's soul. He could not help but say to Lin Hua, "You really know how to play." The most exaggerated thing was that when Ryudo turned around to take out the drinks and food from the bag on the table, Lin Hua on the bed continued to increase the intensity of her flirting. "You were so small before, and now you've grown so tall. Time really flies. Is it that, Sister Lin Hua? Your hand. I'm just checking your body's condition. I've studied medicine. Do you remember? This is a little. I'm not used to it. For the time being, there seems to be no problem with your upper body. Next is to check other places." Slurp. When Lin Hua hugged Yunyin in her arms and righteously checked her body, she looked at Ryudo from time to time, and her expression became even more arrogant. "The drinks are here. Both of you, please enjoy." Seeing his girlfriend being touched by this crazy woman, Ryudo hurriedly threw the food and drinks on the bed, which happened to pile up in the middle of Yunyin and Lin Hua, separating them. Phew. At this time, Yunyin also breathed a sigh of relief, and her cheeks were slightly flushed. How to put it, Yunyin did not hate her cousin's playful sexual contact. But after all, Ryudo was still in the room, and this situation was somewhat strange. But Lin Hua smiled slightly, picked up a bottle of beer, opened it, and handed it to Yunyin, and said with a smile, "To celebrate our fate of meeting in a foreign country, cheers." Before Yunyin raised the cup, Lin Hua had already raised her slender neck and poured 500 milliliters of beer down her throat. Obviously, Lin Hua was a drunkard, and her alcohol tolerance was quite good. Yunyin took the can of beer, looked at her empty can, and steeled her heart, and poured the liquid inside into her stomach. Mm? This beer is. But when Ryudo also started to drink the beer, he frowned slightly, because the alcohol content of this thing was obviously higher than the beer he usually drank. Generally, the alcohol content of ordinary beer was between 3 to 5 degrees, but the beer that Lin Hua chose at this time was at least 8 degrees, and belonged to the category of strong beer. Whoosh! So when Yunyin suddenly drank a bottle of beer, she felt a little dizzy, and she obviously felt the power of this thing. Yunyin, who knew that she would definitely get drunk after drinking a few bottles of this kind of beer, frowned and quickly said, "Sister Lin Hua, this beer. Speaking of which, it's boring for us to just drink. Why don't we play Fight the Landlord? The loser has to unconditionally obey the winner's request. How about it?" Before the two people sitting on the bed could reply, Lin Hua took out the poker cards and placed them between the three of them, and shuffled the cards with a skillful hand. Is there a mistake? This guy really likes to make his own decisions? But forget it. It's just Fight the Landlord. Everyone has a chance to win. Because this world of Red Album 2, No One Lives was produced by a domestic company, there were naturally some games that did not belong to this country, but this was not a big deal. Furthermore, Long Do was not boasting. Just by looking at his golden hair that stood up like a crab's, one could tell that he was a rare card expert. Come on, Tashima Lin Hua. Even if my life is like a candle in the wind, I will use all means to win. Duel. Swish. Just at the moment when Ryuto was ready for battle, Lin Hua also began to deal cards at a speed that made people unable to see his wrist movements. Wow! When seeing Lin Hua's dealing speed, Yunyin couldn't help but widen her eyes because she never thought that a human's dealing speed could be faster than a machine. Almost in just 2 or 3 seconds, the cards in front of the three people had been dealt, and the landlord of the first round also fell into the hands of Lin Hua. Stealing the landlord in the first round? It doesn't matter. Let me see the cards in my hand first. Then I will use my LV4 wisdom to completely. Landlord face card, King Bomb, 2 Bomb, a Bomb, K Bomb, Q Bomb, pair of 3. Spring Dragon, game over. I won the first round. Without waiting for Long Do to see what kind of cards he was holding, Lin Hua had already thrown out the cards in his hand like a string of cannons. Is this a fucking landlord? Is it really the same game as us? When he dealt the cards, he stole the landlord. Lin Hua got a set of cards that only a cheater could get, and instantly ended the first round of battle. Ryudo realized that he was fooled. This woman had already started to tamper with the cards when she shuffled at lightning speed, piling all the good cards on his side. If all of them were bombs, then what was there to play? Tashima Lin Hua, you? Speaking of which, I won the first round, right? Then I'll make a request. Suddenly, Lin Hua grinned slightly, and then in front of Yunyin, she put her long legs wrapped in black lace stockings in front of Ryudo. After shopping for a day today, my legs are a little sore. Please, give me a good massage. In the luxury suite of this hotel, Lin Hua showed a strange smile on her bed, and looked at Ryudo with slightly cloudy eyes. Coupled with Yunyin's sudden intervention, it was even more chaotic. If Yunyan knew that something happened between her cousin and her boyfriend, and it happened right beside her, no matter how good her temper was, she would be so angry that she would slap Ryudo on the spot. Of course, this was not what Ryudo wanted. He did not expect that Lin Hua, this perverted woman, would be so perverted that she would force herself on him in front of her sister. She was simply crazy. There was something wrong with her brain. Don't worry. Lin Hua smiled without looking back. I'm not that kind of little girl. I've said it before, we only want a moment of pleasure. You don't have to be responsible for me, and I won't ask for anything from you. Phew, that's good. When he heard about Lin Hua, Ryudo was slightly relieved. After all, he was scared to death of this crazy woman. He was afraid that she would use last night's incident as an excuse to pester him. After all, after last night's all-night battle, he was actually a little scared when he saw Lin Hua, because this woman was really too powerful. If being with Dunia was like playing in a small stream, being with Yunyan was like rowing a boat in a big river, then being with Lin Hua was like running to the sea on a stormy day to dance at Paradise Disco. It was not something that normal people could enjoy. In the end, Lin Hua's situation was special. Her desire was much stronger than the average person. Coupled with the strong physique that she had obtained from practicing martial arts since she was a child, and perhaps she had taken some medicine herself, it caused her to go crazy. If it weren't for Ryudo's LV5 physique and the Immerse mystic technique that could greatly increase his yang qi, he would have died on the bed last night. It was too terrifying. Therefore, even if he did get a lot of pleasure with Lin Hua last night, Ryudo did not want to try that kind of crazy wave dancing again. It would be more relaxing to find Dunia to play in the stream. At this moment, Yunyan, who was lying on the bed not far away, also woke up in a daze. The first thing that Yunyan saw when she woke up was Ryudo and Lin Hua sitting on the sofa drinking tea. Then, she instinctively smiled and said, "Good morning, why are you guys?" The moment she saw the two, Yunyan remembered what happened between her and Ryuto last night. Originally, the two of them were in an intimate relationship, so it was fine if they did it, but the problem was that they did it in her cousin's room. And they did it almost in front of her. This. At the thought of this, Yunyan's face instantly turned red like a tomato. She immediately pulled the quilt and looked at her body, but she found that her clothes were still intact. It can't be? Could it be that I'm dreaming? I didn't actually do it with Ryudo last night. Hiss. It hurts. Just as Yunyan moved her legs in confusion, she felt an obvious pain from there, and a strange feeling as if her body was about to fall apart. It was not a dream. From the feeling of her body at this time, Yunyan knew that it was not a dream last night. She really did it with Ryudo. But why was it that everyone acted as if nothing had happened when they woke up in the morning? Just when Yunyan was feeling very puzzled, Ryudo put down the teacup and came to the bed with a smile. "You're awake. You drank too much last night and accidentally fell asleep here. You're really a little alcoholic." That, Ryudo, Suddenly, Ryudo quietly made a shushing gesture to Yunyan and then whispered, "Your cousin doesn't know what happened last night. She fell asleep long ago. Don't worry." Oh, really? So that's how it is. When Yunyan heard this sentence, she finally breathed a sigh of relief. She knew that Ryudo helped her change her clothes, pretending that nothing happened last night. It's great. If Sister Lin Hua saw last night, I don't know how to face her in the future. Although Yunyan was bold, she still had the reservedness of a young girl. Although she was no longer a young girl, but a young woman. Indeed, this was just Ryudo and Lin Hua's words to coax Yunyan. They couldn't tell her that there was another fierce battle after her last night, and then they would fight on the spot. After that, Ryudo, Yunyan, and Lin Hua also went to the dining room to have breakfast very tacitly, and the two sisters talked happily at the table, and Lin Hua didn't mention last night at all. "It's almost time. It's time for me to go back to Tokyo." After breakfast, Lin Hua stood up and said to the two people next to her, "Hey, Sister Lin Hua, are you going back now? I can't help it. The holiday is only a few days. Let's meet again in Tokyo." Lin Hua came to Yunyan's side and kissed her gently on the forehead. This kiss was different from the towering kiss that she used to annoy Ryudo before. It was a pure, gentle kiss from an elder sister to a younger sister. It could be seen that Lin Hua still loved this younger sister. However, just when Lin Hua passed by Ryudo, she said in a voice that only the two of them could hear, "By the way, Ryudo-kun, you have to be careful recently. Yatsuki has made a move. They are preparing to deal with you." What? Ryudo frowned when he heard the words, and he quickly turned around. But Lin Hua had already waved her hand while walking toward a taxi on the side of the road. Yatsuki. Is she talking about that Yatsuki? Ryudo was naturally familiar with the organization that Lin Hua mentioned. Yatsuki was the most ancient organization that secretly controlled the entire country. It was composed of the highest-level Golden Heron, the middle-level Dark Crow, and the lower-level Doomfeather. It almost gathered most of the power of the entire upper-class society. In essence, Ryudo and Yatsuki had a grudge. After all, the Kokyo incident that made the royal family lose face was caused by Ryudo, and this guy finally made the Empress and Tianya disappear. People with discerning eyes knew that the Empress had already been reincarnated. The royal family was the face of this country, and it was also the face of Yatsuki. Or it could be said that they raised a dog. Even if you want to beat a dog, you have to consider the owner's face. After beating the dog of Yatsuki, it would be strange if the group of nobles would let Ryudo go. But because of the relationship between Dark Crow and Dark Crow, Ryudo had not been harassed by Yatsuki in the past 6 months. But now Lin Hua mentioned this organization again, and she said that there would be a move from them. Would they come to deal with Ryudo? Humph, a group of despicable guys. Let's see who will die in the end. At this point, Colored Glaze took a deep breath and her expression became extremely cold. It was hard to imagine that the girl who came up with an incomparably cruel plan and was prepared to mercilessly send many people to their deaths was actually the same girl who was happy to receive a wedding ring not long ago. But this was the Colored Glaze. This was the Colored Glaze now. For her own future, for Ryudo's future, for the future of the Kamiyoshi clan. At this time, Colored Glaze had already transformed into a witch who used all her wisdom on killing and scheming. Even if her hands were stained with blood, she would not hesitate. Those who block me, die. Chapter 306. For a moment, almost everyone in the hall was stunned. Colored Glaze and Ryudo were the focus of many people's attention. At this time, Kamiyoshi's daughter actually raised her wine glass and poured water on their heads. This scene naturally attracted everyone's attention. What's going on? Feeling the fragrant wine dripping down from his head, from his hair, cheeks, neck, and all the way to his clothes, Kamishiro Yoshiyuki was even more stunned. He couldn't imagine, he didn't dare to imagine, that Colored Glaze would do such a thing in such a grand public place. After being drenched for a full 2 seconds, Yoshiyuki's expression changed. He wanted to quickly stand up and angrily scold his niece. But the moment Yoshiyuki was about to stand up, 2 strong hands suddenly pressed down on his shoulders. Don't be in such a hurry to get up. We haven't finished drinking yet. Yoshiyuki turned his head stiffly and saw Ryuto looking at him with a kind smile. Although Ryuto was smiling, his eyes were not smiling at all. Instead, it was a try moving again and I'll kill you. I'm going to kill you. Okay? Die. I'll die. If I continue to struggle, I'll be killed by this kid. When he felt the biting, cold, murderous intent, Yoshiyuki's body began to tremble slightly. He could only sit still and enjoy his niece's wine pouring on his head. Traces of wine formed a straight line from the wine glass and finally fell on Yoshiyuki's body. The burning wine and the gazes of the surrounding people made him feel particularly ashamed and resentful, as if he was being publicly executed. What was more infuriating was that Lieli poured the wine very slowly. She didn't pour the wine in the face like a girl would do when she was angry. Instead, she tilted the glass bit by bit like watering flowers, letting the wine drip down slowly. Humiliation. This was obviously a kind of humiliation. An extreme kind of humiliation. After about 30 seconds, colored glaze poured all the wine in the glass on Yoshiyuki's head. At this time, the latter's entire face and upper body were wet, looking like a monkey that was hit by the rain. Crazy. These two people are crazy. They even dared to mess with their own uncle? And it was at Iwasaki-sama's banquet? Looking at colored glaze humiliating Yoshiyuki, the people present did nothing but watch silently. There was nothing they needed to do. Other than lamenting that colored glaze and Ryuto's brains were abnormal, this group of upper-class gentlemen did not say anything because this had nothing to do with them. It was just an internal strife of the Kamiyoshi. Some of the attendants and bodyguards who originally wanted to come over and stop them, after being glared at by Ryuto, obediently retreated, not daring to look over. After the wine ran dry, colored glaze put the glass back on the table with a smile and said to Yoshiyuki with a smile, "How is it? Uncle Yoshiyuki, is my apology enough?" Enough. Enough. Although Yoshiyuki's face was already red with anger, Ryuto's two hands were firmly gripping his shoulders like an iron clamp. Yoshiyuki could only grit his teeth and pretend as if nothing had happened. However, colored glaze continued to smile and said, "But Uncle just poured 3 glasses of wine. How should we deal with the other 2 glasses?" Looking at the 2 glasses of brandy still on the table, Yoshiyuki swallowed a mouthful of saliva and seemed to understand colored glaze's meaning. "Drink. Of course, I, as your uncle, will drink on your behalf." Before his voice fell, Yoshiyuki quickly picked up the glasses from the table and poured the 2 glasses of wine into his throat. Ugh. When he drank the brandy that was more than 40 degrees, Yoshiyuki only felt a burning sensation in his throat and stomach. This made him quickly cover his mouth to prevent himself from spitting out the wine on the spot. Chapter 307. Colored Glaze and Ryuto only found out that filial piety Kanzaki was Iwasaki Reiko's fiancé when they arrived at the scene. They didn't expect that Yoshiyuki would be so generous as to sell his son to Iwasaki as a son-in-law, so they didn't have time to deal with filial piety. But just because they didn't have time to deal with filial piety, it didn't mean that they didn't have time to do something else. After all, in this engagement banquet, the bride's identity was definitely Iwasaki Reiko. So Ryuto had already asked Sensible to dig up everything about this woman and unexpectedly found out a lot of interesting things. Iwasaki Reiko, 39 years old this year. As the eldest daughter of Iwasaki Yanasuke, she grew up in a wealthy family and was coaxed like a little princess, so her personality and hobbies were very bad. Just how bad was her personality? Usually, when she moved, she would yell at people, throw things everywhere, and she even liked to grab a bunch of strong men to whip them, drop candles, and sit on the strong men as stools. To put it simply, Iwasaki Reiko was a pervert, almost as perverted as Lin Hana, but her appearance and temperament were not even 1% of Lin Hana's, and her personality was even worse, the kind that made people unable to like her at all. He. So this is my fiancé. How should I treat him when I go back tonight? Hiss, with a newly ordered whip? On the second floor of the Iwasaki mansion, Reiko looked at the pale fiancé standing next to her, unconsciously licked her lips, and then threw a coquettish glance at filial piety. "I. What the F asterisk CK?" After being winked at by his fiancée, filial piety only felt his stomach churning, and he almost vomited on the ground in front of his father-in-law and the guests below. What was even more terrifying was that when the couple stood together on the stage, a large projection screen slid down from the wall behind them. It began to play the love memoirs of the two people from their first meeting, to their first meeting, to their first love, to their first love. However, if one was slightly knowledgeable, one would know that the scene on the screen was obviously created with special effects. Although it was the work of a professional, it was still fake, and one could see the flaws if one looked closely. Filial piety himself was dizzy watching it. After all, he clearly remembered that today was the first time he met Reiko, and the two of them didn't even speak much, so how did they create a love memoir? Public execution. For the current filial piety Kanzaki, he felt that he was being executed in an inhumane way. The most terrifying thing was that this public execution had just started. The actual execution was the actual execution, after Sensible started. At the same time, just as the screen began to play the love memoirs of the two, Sensible, who was in a house not far away, smiled sinisterly as he pressed the buttons on the rows of computers and special devices in front of him, transmitting the signal. Asterisk whoosh. Asterisk the next moment, the scene on the screen changed. Originally, Koyuki Kanzaki and Reiko Iwasaki's sweet love story was playing on the screen. However, the screen suddenly flashed as a different video appeared on it. Eh? The moment they saw the video, everyone except for Ryudo and Colored Glaze were stunned. This was because an extremely exaggerated scene was currently being displayed on the huge projection screen. It was a scene of several strong and muscular men kneeling on the ground one after another as they were violently whipped by an expired young miss who was wearing a skin-tight leather jacket that weighed over 200 kilograms. Chapter 308. Looking at the phone in Ryudo's hand that was obviously recording and had already uploaded the video, almost everyone felt a chill in their hearts. Especially Iwasaki Yaosuke, who was standing on the high platform. He felt completely dumbfounded. How could there be such a person in the world? This is too shameless, too obscene, too hooligan, because he wanted to scold Ryudo too much. Iwasaki felt that his vocabulary seemed to be a little lacking. Suddenly, Kamishiro Yoshiyuki, who was sitting next to Ryuto, couldn't help but ask with his mouth wide open, You uploaded the video just now to the internet? Yeah, and it was uploaded by dozens of domestic and foreign websites at the same time. I'm afraid even God can't take it back. Speaking of this, Ryuto couldn't help but smile and patted Yoshiyuki's head, and said with a smile, Brother, your son's cuckold will soon be known by the world. I suggest you quickly change his name. He. In an instant, Yoshiyuki trembled with anger. After pointing at Ryuto with a trembling hand, he couldn't help but faint on the spot. Thump. Although Yoshiyuki fell to the ground, no one in the surrounding hall seemed to care about him because everyone was shocked by Ryuto's actions. Even if they knew in advance that Ryudo and Colored Glaze came here with the intention of falling out with Iwasaki, they didn't expect them to be so ruthless. This combination of punches really made Iwasaki dizzy, and it also made the bystanders dizzy. Collecting dirt on someone else's daughter, hacking into someone else's computer at their daughter's engagement party, and even recording the various embarrassing moments of Iwasaki's family and uploading them to the internet. Was this something a human would do? What kind of environment was the internet? That was the real sea of stars. No matter what kind of video it was, as long as it was uploaded to the internet, it would never be cleaned up. Not to mention a mere golden heron. Even if the entire Yatsuki Crow went bankrupt, they still wouldn't be able to do it. This was not something that humans could do. Great, now it's over. Some of the people present reacted quickly. They even picked up their phones and quickly searched for some of the more popular forums. Sure enough, a post titled, Rich Young Miss Likes Fierce Men, publicly exposed her ugly behavior during her engagement banquet, had already appeared on those forums along with a video. Moreover, Many netizens began to comment crazily after reading it. What kind of rich young lady is this? You look like a pig, but you like to play with whips? What a strong taste. Ha ha ha. But it's too tragic that it was broadcasted at the engagement ceremony. Her husband was so angry that he fell to the ground. Wait, isn't that old man Iwasaki Yanasuke? Iwasaki Yanasuke? The CEO of the great Japanese bank? One of the top 10 richest men in Japan? Really? Sigh. It seems to be true. The young lady of the Iwasaki family looks like this. Aren't there photos online? Netizens were creatures that were most passionate about all kinds of new and interesting gossip, especially this kind of gossip that happened in a rich family, and it was very exciting. It would greatly arouse the netizens' desire to comment and spread it. After all, the Iwasaki family was a famous family in Japan. Iwasaki Yanasuke and Iwasaki Reiko were also characters who often appeared on TV and in news reports. It was not difficult to find their identity information and make comparisons. Therefore, in just a few minutes, the enthusiastic netizens dug out all the identities of the protagonists in the video, and then crazily spread the video to their friends, friends of friends, and friends of friends of friends. At this speed, in less than an hour, the entire Tokyo and even the entire Japan should know that the CEO of the great Japanese bank was exposed at the engagement banquet.